Good evening. Calling to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the El Segundo City Council, Wednesday, July 5th. Please rise, and Pastor Wes Harding from the Bridge Church will give our invocation, and Councilmember Dugan will lead us in the pledge.
Mayor, City Council members, thank you for the wonderful celebration yesterday. We can all be very proud of that. Thank you for allowing prayer to be in this meeting because it matters in our community. It matters here. Let us pray. Dear wise and loving Father, first let me say thank you. On behalf of all those who are gathered here today, thank you for the many abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work, for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thank you as well for the freedom to embrace and the freedom to reject you. Thank you for loving us even so, for your holy and gracious nature. In the scriptures, you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since you have established these very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, I pray for our mayor and our various levels of city officials, in particular the assembled council. I pray for the city workers, the police, the fire, and other first responders. Please protect them and their families. We are a community of families, so I ask that you would bless and protect them as well. And as I am asking that you would graciously grant all those who are assembled here the wisdom to govern amid conflicting interests and issues of our time, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, the ability to work together in harmony even where there are honest disagreements. I pray for the agenda set before us today. Please give an assurance of what we would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of El Segundo. It is in your most holy and righteous name that we pray. Amen.
Join me.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So this evening, our city manager is going to begin with an introduction.
Mayor, council members of the public, I'm pleased tonight to welcome Chief Bill Whalen, our new chief of police, to his very first city council meeting. This is his third day at work. He had the joy and privilege of being here on 4th of July with his folks. I think I'll ask Bill to come up and say a few words about himself rather than have me do that. Come on to the microphone.
Mayor and City Council, good to see you again. Thank you very much for coming today. That was quite an event we had this morning. I feel like I have my back to you guys. I apologize for that. But by brief way of introduction, my name's Bill, and I've been in law enforcement for about 28 years now. I started in Garden Grove in 1989. I worked various assignments there, and in 1999 I went to the city of Irvine, where again I was fortunate. In fact, in our invocation, the term blessed was used, and I might use that term often this evening. I was blessed with what I had in my career to work various assignments: detective, SWAT, emergency management for several years. I commanded the operations division, and again being blessed to be selected to be your police chief at this fine organization here. Like the city manager said, I've only been on the job 3 days, but I've had an opportunity to see what a wonderful community this is and what a highly professional and service-oriented this police department is. I am very excited to be a part of it. So thank everybody for the warm welcome, and I look forward to meeting all of you and working with you in the days to come.
Thank you. Wait, don't go. Chief Whalen, we have a certificate of recognition for you from our State Senator Ben Allen in recognition of your new role as Chief of Police for the City of El Segundo, with sincere appreciation for your service and continued dedication to law enforcement. Thank you for making our community a better and safer place, and Council and the City Manager would like a photo of you with this, please. And Chief, we are delighted you are here, sir. City Clerk, roll call.
Councilmember Perstuck,
Here.
Councilmember Brand,
Present.
Councilmember Dugan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyles.
Here.
Mayor Fuentes.
Here. Now is the time for public communications related to city business only. 5 minutes per person, 30 minutes total. See no public communications, we will close procedural motions. Consideration of a motion to read all ordinances and resolutions on the agenda by title only.
Moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Special order of business, public hearing. This is time and place heretofore fixed for a public hearing. Consideration and possible action regarding approval of environmental assessment of EA-1161 and introduction of an ordinance, zone text amendment number ZTA 16-05 to amend various sections of the El Segundo Municipal Code, Title 15 zoning, making numerous corrections and general edits, cleanup. Adopting this ordinance is statutorily exempt from further environmental reviews under the CEQA Act and CEQA guidelines because it consists only of minor revisions and clarifications for existing zoning regulations and related procedures. Applicant, City of El Segundo. City Clerk, was proper notice of the hearing given in a timely manner?
Yes, it was.
And has any written communication been received regarding this public hearing?
None has been received.
Okay, so the public hearing is now open. City Manager, who will make the presentation?
Mayor, members of council, Greg McLean, our planning manager, will make this presentation. As you noted, this is a staff-initiated, very broad sort of cleanup of our zoning regulations. We've done a number of determinations and interpretations over the years, and we really feel it's appropriate that if there are going to be rules and regulations that are enforced, that they be in the ordinance. So that is part of it, and there are some other elements to this as well.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is, as the city manager stated, a staff-initiated cleanup amendment. This is the first of hopefully an annual cleanup because little changes are found throughout, or little mistakes, I guess, little misinterpretations and so forth are found occasionally, and every year we want to stay on top of them going forward. This one's a bit of a big one. There's over 50 changes proposed in this one. So in a nutshell, what this ordinance does is several things. It adds and updates definitions. It clarifies some general provisions, modifies certain R2 and R3 zone standards, modifies uses in the non-residential zones, and also modifies certain parking requirements. And I'll go into each of these in just a little bit more detail. So on definitions, you can see up there we have a number of definitions that should have been in the code because they're actual uses in the city or they're useful, like director, and that were not included. And so these are all being added. So just to run down the list: animal hospital, director, fitness center, lot coverage, medical office, research and development. All of those were not defined, and they are going forward. General provisions. First, with regard to building heights, we've noticed that a lot of developments now want to have rooftop decks and patios, and guardrails were never accounted for before in terms of the building heights. So we're adding how to deal with guardrails. Also on walls and fence height, this is mostly just clarifications and cleaning up of the language to make it quite understandable. Deals mostly with cuts and fills on slopes. Alley clearance, what we're asking is that we have a 5-foot vision clearance at the end of certain driveways, just like at the end of alleys, just like at the end of a driveway or a street. You need to be able to see down the sidewalk a little bit, and pedestrians need to be able to see the cars coming. So a small clearance at alleys is what we're proposing here. Encroachments, Specifically, we're looking at detached arbors in the front yards of single-family residential lawns, but also some landings near the doorways on non-street facing sides of the house. And then for screening, what we had in mind there was the rooftop screening in industrial buildings that hide the equipment. It was never very specific before. It's much more specific now, but we also add a little bit of design flexibility, and we also go into description on how to determine when a screen is required. In the R2 and the R3 zone, in the R2 zone first, the front yard encroachments, we've noticed that a lot of the R2 lots are in the same street side as a series of R1 lots. R1 lots are allowed to push their porches out 6 feet into the encroachment, but R2 was not allowed. This would just make it the same, so it would look consistent. In the R3 zone, we're simplifying the front yard setback. It was an average of 20 feet and had a bunch of other rules and so forth. We'll just make a straight 15 feet. And we also clarified some of the encroachment language there. Under permitted uses, animal hospitals, daycare, and fitness in the C zones, these are uses that had been allowed in various zones, but it wasn't in the code. The public wasn't generally aware of it, so we're just codifying those things. Production studios, same thing. These would be allowed in Smoky Hollow. We feel that it fits in with the vision of Smoky Hollow. Car rental agencies, same thing. They were permitted in some zones, but it wasn't in the code. Various versions of dog daycare in the M1 zone. CUP if it has outdoor dog runs. And updating the language and streamlining the terminology for all these uses. Throughout the code, the many chapters, including the parking chapter, uses have been described by using different words for the same thing. So this just kind of standardizes all of that. For parking, we're not doing a lot of tweaking in the parking chapter. We're starting with the off-site parking covenants. We're providing a little bit more flexibility to the director, but also guidance on what an appropriate distance from one property to another to have the parking is. Paving, we're allowing for pervious surfaces so that rainwater can seep through the pavement instead of having to go to the storm drains. And encroachments and setbacks, we're proposing that parking lots be allowed to get a little bit closer to the property lines. Currently, all of our landscape requirements in the parking lots occur around the perimeter, and we're proposing that landscaping might be more appropriately bunched up in different places if we allowed the parking to get closer to the property lines. No reduction in landscaping, no reduction in parking, just shifting it around on the site. Lighting, our current standard is a little bit inconsistent with the police regulations and also with the energy code, so we're just standardizing that. Tandem parking, this is a big change. We're proposing that in all zones, tandem parking be 2 spaces, not 3, as it is currently allowed in some of the zones. We find that 3 deep tandem parking really is not very functional. It requires too much coordination. Driveways and curb cuts, we found that the standard was just a little bit too wide. For example, a 20-foot wide 2-way drive aisle exceeds, I think, the norm by about 2 feet. So we've cut that down to 18 feet. This is interior, like within a parking lot, how wide the aisles are. 18 is plenty. Parking for the daycare, we had no standard for that, so now we do. So to recap, this ordinance adds definitions. It clarifies some of the provisions that I outlined. It modifies certain standards in R2 and non-residential zones and minor parking adjustments. And that concludes my report. I'm available if you have any questions.
And Madam Mayor and members of the council, if I can just add very briefly, as some of you know, some of you own property in certain R2 and R3 and some of the non-residential zones. So if any of the council members want to discuss anything in those 3rd or 4th bullet points, we may have to ask or recommend some of the council members recuse themselves. Some of the changes that Planning Manager McLean mentioned are across the board, apply citywide. Under the ethics rules, if a regulation that the city council is considering would apply to more than 25% of the city or greater, then it can be considered by all the council members, even if you own property in particular zones that are affected. What's unique about this ordinance is that, like the 3rd bullet point, it's only making certain changes in R2 and R3, and even those changes are different in each of the zones, so we can't sort of group R2 and R3 together so that it would constitute more than 25%, which is why we're sort of having to single some of you out if you want to talk about anything in the third or fourth bullet point. So just let us know and we'll guide you through the process.
Okay, so the public hearing is now open for public input. So, seeing no public input, we'll close the public hearing and discussion. Oh, sorry, motion to close the public hearing.
So
Almost.
moved.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed 5-0. Council discussion.
There are a couple topics that are relate to all, right? So one would be can you talk about the lot coverage as it relates to uncovered decks and patios? I think you mentioned it briefly in the presentation, but I know it's in the text amendment.
Excuse me, I don't actually recall what the change was on that. If you,
All the changes are in bold and underlined, right?
If you, yes, if you could direct me to the page, I would be able to.
Page 6, under
Thank you.
lot coverage. It just reads, there's 3, I don't know if they're definitions of lot coverage or bullets under lot coverage. One, and the C is the one I'm interested in,
Yep.
which looks to be the change. Uncovered decks and patios, which are 30 inches or more in height, are also included in lot coverage.
Right, so your typical deck or patio that is not 30 inches or higher above the ground is not going to be counted in the lot coverage. It's just like as if you poured a concrete slab. We won't count that. But if you start to build up your patio, especially going out over a hill, and it gets higher and higher, when it gets to the point of 30 inches high, from that point on, we start counting the portion that's over 30 inches.
Regardless of where it is in the structure?
Yeah, this is just in terms of calculating lot coverage.
Because you mentioned rooftop early on, so does that relate specifically to this?
No, because a
Okay.
rooftop is on top of a building which is already covering the lot. So lot coverage is not a height measurement, it's just strictly
Okay,
the portions that are
Got
covered
it.
by something.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a clarification of a determination that we have on file. It was not readily known to the public, but it's been on the books for a while.
And on the rooftop decks, what you're including now is the railings for the rooftop decks.
Yeah, there's a provision that allows a little bit of encroachment for railings, I believe. As I recall, the guardrails that you can see through are treated differently than a solid wall, even if it's the same height. This just clarifies that.
I have a few questions on pages 14 and 15 when you're done.
Okay.
The first is production studios, and I get a lot of comments from people with businesses in the area that the production studios are used for more than photography, that they're used for events, which takes a lot of parking in the area. So if we're going to approve this, I think we need to do a better job of making sure that those buildings aren't using all the parking in the area. Because there's different amounts of parking required for different uses.
That is correct, and that's duly noted.
I think it's an enforcement issue.
Yes.
So the next one is for permitting car rental agencies.
Yes.
Another thing I have heard is that the car rental agencies, one in particular in town, will move all of its cars from its location on one side of town to a location on the other side of town, which is residential or encroaches residential, especially around holidays. And so it uses up the parking for those residential areas. So I think they need to be talked to about being a good neighbor.
Yes, that's also an enforcement issue, and we will address that.
Okay, thank you. And then the last one is on page 15, and that's instead of requiring 2 parking spaces for visitor parking for every 3 units, only one. This really concerns me. I think one of the most precious commodities in town these days are parking. So we're taking away the requirement for property owners to provide more parking, and we're offloading it to the streets, which are already burdened and are going to be even more burdened with the ADU law. So that's a concern to me. I don't know if any other council members have that concern. It's 8B, page 15, 8B. One of the things I'm contacted most about, or stopped in town about, or read online about, is about parking availability. And people's frustration not being able to park, not just in front of their own house, but on their own block. So. Pardon? Well, I lived by a school for 50 years myself, Dr. Brand, so that's.
If I may go back to a previous question, we found the answer. Yeah, this was the part that deals with guardrails, and what it states is that open work guardrails and certain other features of the building, but also non-permanent accessories such as barbecues, umbrellas, and so forth can be erected above the height limit. That was the clarification. So guardrails were lumped in with those things. And it does specify open work, so a solid wall would still have to be under the height limit.
Any more discussion, council?
There we go. Greg, you mentioned the tandem parking was no longer functional. Just curious, how do you define functional, and how is that defined? And
That was 3 spots, not 2.
from 3 to 2.
Yeah.
What did I say? 3 to 3?
You just said.
No.
Oh,
just
yeah.
said tandem.
Going from
No,
3 to 2.
tandem is still functional. Three we're finding it just becomes a little bit unused because it's not in practice easy to coordinate. So what we're seeing is a lot of the 3 tandem spaces, they only use 2 of them and leave the deepest one empty. And it is kind of an unusual feature. I've in my experience, I've never seen a city that allowed 3 deep tandem before. Maybe in certain office towers, garage, basement, but that's about the only place I've ever seen it other than here. So we believe that it won't impinge on people's ability to develop their property. It'll just come out looking different. So the parking arrangement will be more standard.
Okay. The other one was the definition of R&D. It seems to tighten up. I know there have been concerns that people were calling many different things R&D and then therefore reducing their parking requirements, right? I imagine that's the catalyst here, but
Yep.
It looked to be a little bit narrow, and I don't even know if I can weigh in on this one, David, because I have a commercial property in the SB zone.
The definition of R&D would apply citywide, so that would apply to more than just the SB zone. So you can speak to.
Yeah, I can't remember the page, but I did make a note of it. It just seems to me that it talks more about the research and development of physical, tangible products, and I mean, there's a lot of R&D that's certainly outside that realm.
Yes, you're right. This definition was tailored to address the parking situation. What we were finding was that a lot of creative offices and other lower intensity uses were calling themselves, or excuse me, higher intensity uses were calling themselves R&D on their plans, and then would actually function as a creative office requiring more parking. So this was narrowly tailored just to address that. Certainly, somebody could be doing R&D with software and other intangible things, but we feel that in that situation, for all practical purposes, the intensity of the use is much more like an office. Yeah, it's not a prohibited use. They absolutely could do it. They would just have to provide parking at the office rate.
Other comments?
Yeah, excuse me, I have one here up. There's about 45 or so pages of things, information in front of us here, and it's under the headline of "This was presented as a cleanup." There are some new additions in here, and I guess the question is, it went through the Planning Commission, and they adopted it as written or whatever. I wonder how much of this is actually new information, and how was the new information vetted? How was that, I guess, vetted throughout the communities to make sure that we are touching everything? Because we're getting 5 minutes here to talk about 50 pages of stuff. That's a lot of detail in here, and there are some newer things in here that don't show up. So how do we vet that out to make sure that the residents and everybody else have had a chance to really absorb that before it just gets picked up in a code here?
There are, as I recall, just a few things that were new, and I think 2 of them have already been called out, and I honestly can't remember if there's any others besides those 2, the triple tandem parking and the, sorry, what was the other one the mayor brought up? You brought up one that was
That I brought
guest
up?
guest parking standard. Yeah, those are the only 2 that come to mind. There may be a few others. The vetting process was the same as any others. This is made available, and it goes to the Planning Commission. A public hearing is held. It's available for the week before the hearing for anyone to review. It's online. It's on the city's webpage too. And then the public hearing process, and then again for the city council, same process, only 2 meetings.
Okay.
So,
Director, most of these things are the result of...
Share the question with
directors
everybody here. So
Yeah, this question was, when a director's interpretation is done, is that done in the public? And the answer is sometimes, most of the time, but not always. If it's a very minor interpretation, it's a clarification of the language, those can just be done and distributed among staff. A lot of what you see here is a result of putting those things into the code. Otherwise, the director can make an interpretation on the meaning of some phrase or some term, and then typically that would go to the Planning Commission for review, and most of those interpretations did go through that process over the years. This was something like 10 or 15 years worth of interpretations.
so earlier you had mentioned that this is going to be an ongoing process, that hopefully annually you'll be doing this, bringing so that the list will be smaller. Are you putting a process in place to capture all the things that come up within the year so that there's a comprehensive list of all the things that need to be addressed for that next year? And so that everyone knows that if there's something coming up, like if some change needs to happen or something needs to be interpreted, that it can go on some type of list that it can be addressed in the next go-around of the ordinance.
Yes, we are keeping track of that, and I think what you're implying is that we ought to make that available to the public as we build it, and I think that's a fine idea.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for taking this initiative on. It. I'm sure it took a lot of effort to get this done.
So there are no more comments. City Attorney will read the ordinance by title only.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll read the ordinance title, and also just because of the unique situation with this ordinance and the various zones that are affected, councilmember zoning property in certain zones, what we would recommend is that Councilmember Dugan, if he's agreeable to, would actually introduce the ordinance, only because he's the only one that doesn't own any property that's affected by this ordinance. It's a little bit of a unique situation, but just to be on the safe side, we would recommend that if Councilmember Dugan is agreeable to it.
And I don't own property, but you said because I have a long-term lease.
That's right, yeah, in the R2 zone. So I'll be glad to read the ordinance title. An ordinance amending various sections of the El Segundo Municipal Code, Title 15 Zoning Code.
I'm eyeballing Sam in the corner. What happens if I say no, Sam? I'm just trying to figure this out. No. For Greg, I'll introduce, just so you.
Thank you. So the second reading and adoption of the ordinance is scheduled for July, let's say, 18th, 2017. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Okay, reports of committees, commissions, and boards. Consideration and possible action to announce the appointments to the Planning Commission. As we said at our last meeting, and I'll say again this meeting, we always have so many talented, accomplished people in town who want to serve our city. We're very grateful. The decision is always difficult. And we chose Jay Hoschler, for a full term expiring June 30th, 2021. So thank you very much. Mr. Hoschler? Pardon? Oh, thank you very much. Sorry about that. Thank you for your willingness to serve. I know you were on our Arts and Cultural Committee also, so thank you. Let's see. Our next item is consideration and possible action to adopt a resolution joining other United States cities in the Climate Mayors Network supporting the goals of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Fiscal impact none. City Manager?
Tracy Zarnicki, the chair of the Environmental Committee, is going to make this presentation.
Going to be the technical support and second half of the presentation. So, good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Boyles, councilpersons, those of you in the room and those of you watching from home. My name is Tracy Miller-Zarnicki. I'm currently serving as the chair of the Environmental Committee. And with me tonight is Kevin McGuy, one of our committee members. Also in the room is Chris Lubes from our committee. All that made it tonight. We present this resolution today because now more than ever in our lifetime, we as a city must take more responsibility for our local effects on the environment. Now that environmental protections are being cast aside at the highest levels of government in our nation, we need to keep the watch. We need to protect our residents and our future. We recognize that the very existence of our city sprung from heavy industrial production, and we are grateful that our neighboring businesses have been mindful at keeping their emissions at bay as much as they have been. But due to recent shifts in national legislative focus, we've already heard concerns from our own citizens who fear that our skies will be filled with toxic waste, which will end up polluting our water, our land, and our bodies. We hereby propose a resolution to support the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, to show our solidarity with over 338 other cities in our nation and 195 countries around the world that have accepted their roles as members of the global community in protecting our planet to the best of our civilized human abilities. Here's more from Kevin and a lovely slideshow.
Good evening, Mayor Fuentes, Mayor Pro Tem Boyles, and council members. Thanks for having us and giving us this opportunity, and thank you for your service to our city as well. So again, we're going to propose, we're going to give a presentation on a recommendation to join the Climate Mayors. So a quick history on the climate agreement. It was developed in 2015 through the participating nations of the Convention for Climate Change. It was adopted in Paris in 2015. Really, the target of the agreement is to keep global temperatures from rising more than 2 degrees Celsius, which comes out to 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually, in the grand scheme of things, it is quite a high amount. And if you imagine your own body, you know, you're 98.6 degrees, if you raise your temperature by 3.6 degrees, it has a pretty debilitating effect on you. You know, you're pretty bedridden at that point, and the Earth kind of has that same mentality where it doesn't seem like a high number, but overall it has great effects on the environment. All but 2 countries in the convention of the 200 countries declined to enter the agreement, Nicaragua and Syria, and they have other pressing issues in their countries to deal with to not participate in this. The U.S. entered the agreement when it was adopted in December 2015 through executive action by the Obama administration. And executive action essentially means that if it's entered into through executive action, then it could be pulled out of through executive action, which is what President Trump did a month or so ago against the advisement of some of his top advisors, his family advisors, including his daughter and his son-in-law, his cabinet members, Secretary of State, Secretary of Energy, and the Secretary of Defense. Several or hundreds of businesses, including very successful global businesses, Apple, HP, Nike, Johnson Electric, even the oil industry, ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, and our very own Chevron all urged the president to stay in the agreement, as well as the Pope. But yet he declined to stay in, and he pulled out of the agreement. So this slide shows you the targets that were originally agreed to by the United States. They agreed to, it's using their terms, it's a nationally determined contribution, and that's the contribution that each country designates to make to contribute to this agreement. So the U.S. agreed to 26% reduction of GHGs on 2005 levels by 2030. Just to give you a sense of what we're doing here in California, as you guys know, California is the most aggressive state in the union in terms of environmental regulations, and is particularly for GHG emissions and climate change. So the United States the California most recently passed SB 32, which extended AB 32. AB 32 is the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006. SB 32 was an extension of that, looking to greenhouse gas emissions and positive effects on climate change past 2020. So our latest target through SB 32 is a 40% reduction of 1990 levels by 2030. As you can see, it's far more aggressive than what the United States agreed to in the agreement. There are a number of regulations and initiatives through the state that have already been codified and adopted that will help to get us to this goal, including cap and trade, the low carbon fuel standard, SB 350, which requires 50% of renewables from utilities, the short-lived climate pollutant initiative, and the mobile source strategy. Just to give you a sense, our utility provider, SCE, by 2020, they're projecting a goal of renewables, or their projection of renewables of 41% by 2020. So even Edison, our utility provider, will far exceed what the United States agreed to in the agreement. I think that because we're looking at the country as a whole, all 50 states, it's a rather conservative goal when it comes down to it compared to what we're doing in California. And the point of me giving you these numbers and giving you information on this is to kind of show that because we're in California, as a city, we're likely to meet this goal, whether we do anything about it or not. Really, we want you guys to join the Mayor's Climate Network, kind of use it as a way to stake our position on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And also, EPA also has several things in play. The Clean Power Plan is still, that's probably going to be stricken down, but there are things in place like the EPA truck standards to reduce GHG emissions and fuel economy standards, and then the EPA renewable fuel standard, which is similar to our low carbon fuel standard here in California. So as Tracy mentioned, 338 mayors have already entered into this network, and this map shows you the wide variety of cities that have entered. You know, it's not just the coastal elites. The Dakotas aren't that keen to it, but you know, there's representation from pretty much all the other states. And there's no formal mechanism to join. There's no real hard commitments or dollar commitments that you have to make to join. It really is to join, sign on to this resolution, and we as the environmental committee can come up with recommendations to help support that, and at no cost to the city. So some of the benefits that we can get out of this is, if we do promote energy efficiency, we can save, cost for city residences, for the city as a municipality, and for businesses, existing businesses and businesses coming in. And a lot of cities that are entering this agreement, they look at it as a competitive advantage to boost local economic development. They want it to take a claim that their city supports this, and a lot of new companies, especially if you are looking to get into the tech or creative fields, those are industries that it's a quickly growing industry, and they're looking for space, but they put high value on social issues such as this one. And of course, we have the potential to reduce emissions by the initiatives that we potentially develop by joining this. And again, it's public publicity, marketing. It's good to market these folks to come in and be part of our community, especially if we're talking about attracting new businesses to fill up all the available commercial space in our city. And it's an opportunity to participate in activities. One of the activities through the network is they have monthly calls and that we can participate in. But I think that whoever participates in that can get good insight on what other cities are doing and how they're leveraging their participation in this to benefit their city, whether it be through economic development, through potential green space opportunities. But but joining gives us an opportunity to interact with these other cities, these other leading cities that are involved in this. And with that, I guess we'll open it up for questions. But the proposal or the recommendation is to adopt the resolution, join the climate network.
Thank you.
First off, I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and we got several volunteers on different committees and commissions. Ryan Baldino's here from Planning, Chris Lubes, and you guys from Environment, and now Jay. Just thank you for all your time. This took a lot of effort. This is a pretty bold move, I think, coming from a committee. I appreciate that. You guys making that, taking that initiative and bringing this forward. I just want to, first of all, it was news to me that most of the major oil companies supported this endeavor, which was surprising me. I knew a lot of the tech companies and the forward-thinking progressive companies were there. Can you just confirm that there's no administrative burden or cost that's associated with this program going forward? Or if there is, to what extent?
It's to the extent that we would like to. I mean, if we wanted to do emission inventories or anything like that, then that would cost money. But there's no real requirement to do that.
Add what the network states is cities are asked to do a greenhouse inventory, greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We, as the environmental committee, already have this as part of the plan that we're working on. The COG has this as part of what they do. So we're already, as part of that network, actively involved with this type of work. As Kevin mentioned, there is a monthly call that they ask that someone from each city, a sustainability or climate lead, participate in. Not mandatory, but it could be anyone that you deem appropriate. And it's really, again, it's a networking opportunity that we hope to connect with other cities and work together towards a cleaner future.
So just to recap, very little, if any, administrative burden. We would already be exceeding what's called for with these standards by way of the California standards, right?
California.
And most of the oil companies and the big companies in California support this endeavor. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I didn't know Chevron supported this. Did you, Mike?
Yeah, I did. But there's, to me, I think that I'll speak for myself. I support greenhouse gas emission reductions and things, and all the things that we go after in these accords. What I get concerned about when we start getting into these kind of issues are who has jurisdiction over the overall emissions of facilities, and then how do you enforce that, right? Today, right, the EPA sets the federal standards, and California is more stringent than the EPA, so the CARB and AQMD have the standards for our area here. They're the group that ought to be the ones that are sponsoring this and involved with it, because they have the regulatory and enforcement capabilities to deal with it. The rest of it, for us, I'll support reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, but I don't know how you get into an overall environment where you have a structured requirement and then you have a enforceable action against that. And if you're not going to get to that point, I don't see that we're really gaining anything other than just supporting an ongoing effort here. So I applaud the effort. I support the intent of it. But when it gets into the regulatory side of it, I don't think this is a good idea, because I think what you're setting up is the possibility to have another agency involved in a permitting process that's going to drive things here. And I worry about that. And believe me, things will get skewed and when somebody submits a permit, whether it's a company, I worry about that piece of it. That's my biggest concern.
Well, under the agreement, I mean, the city wouldn't be involved in any of the permitting. I mean, whether we're in it or not, the permitting requirements are going to be done by the AQMD and the new source review process. Whether or not we're a part of this doesn't murky that water in any way.
It's merely a collaboration, a networking opportunity for us to join with other like-minded cities across the nation as a network of mayors officially, but it's city-level persons that are involved. We're not going to ask you to go out with a little greenhouse emissions monitor and walk around town. not that. It is a collaborative network of shared ideas.
My point is, today I have none of that. That's enforced at the AQMD level as at a basin level here in LA. So that's how the infrastructure is set up today, and that's how it's managed. And this is going to complicate that. I worry about that. So that's.
I'm having mic problems. MIC, not MIK.
Yeah, you know.
No, but to Mike's point, I had a question about how do we measure it. So I hear you saying there is no enforcement, there is no regulatory. It's basically an intent, right? A spirit to want to participate. But how would we even measure that we are reducing greenhouse gas? I mean, I guess I know that one of the things on the agenda, for example, is a hybrid car, and typically we haven't bought hybrid cars, I don't think, historically. Is that how we do it, just decisions that we make within the city in terms of purchasing and other things, or how do you see affecting these goals?
The way we look at it as a city is making smarter choices moving forward. Yes, buying electric vehicles, buying equipment that does not create more pollution. There are many things you can do. Again, we're trying to pull together the most feasible opportunities for the city to take action in our plan. But it is a global issue. We're talking about just networking about. It's not setting new laws right now today. It's about talking with other cities about what can we do to take care of our planet collectively.
I just have to question whether this is within the scope of the El Segundo City Council. Is it city-related business? That's what it is printed on each of our agendas. Public comment only on city-related business. This seems out of bounds to me. Just out of our scope, and I don't think we should take a vote or a position on it.
It's a city position that is being asked. So that's why we are here.
So I've been asked by several people, I've been emailed and asked by people to join this, and my response is always the same. I get very engaged in city, regional, and state issues. I do not publicly comment on national or international. That is out of my purview as a council member elected to a city council in California. So I will not take a position on this.
It's interesting. I met with a electric vehicle manufacturer, startup mode, doing really well, venture backed. One of the founding executives is from Tesla, and El Segundo's on their map as a potential site, not only for R&D and design, but also for assembly. Actually, assembling cars here. Imagine repurposing some of the hangar bays that eventually will be idle. And I think companies like that want cities that are progressive and environmentally minded. I can tell you personally, when AB 32 was enacted, under the best intentions by Governor Schwarzenegger, there were some major implications for my business. It almost put me out of business. And a lot of it had to do with retrofitting vehicles to be particulate filtration systems, all these things. So I get concerned about the regulatory component, knowing that there is no regulatory component to this, and it's really about wanting to participate in the spirit of leading from an environmentally minded standpoint. I absolutely support it. And I do think it is a city issue. It has been for 300 other mayors and cities, and I think it starts local. That's my position. Thank you.
Yeah, and to add to that, the Climate Mayors program does talk about the fact that responding to climate change provides communities with an opportunity to access first mover advantage in the range of products, services, and know-how that transitioning into a climate compatible future brings. So exactly, companies like that want to see that you think about that and align with their goals.
I'm aligning with Mayor Pro Tem Boyles that I feel that as a city we have to put, I know there's no regulatory initiatives on us, but to put our face forward that we want to ensure that we're making the right decisions and making, decisions for our planet. So I'm in favor.
We hope that this collaboration will continue to grow, and again, ideas inspire other ideas, and with cities talking to each other around the country and countries around the world, we can make a difference by sharing ideas and all working forward together. That's the idea and the spirit behind this.
One question, so if we do decide to move forward and go down, accept this, what's the, how do we get out of it if we decide that it is becoming cumbersome? Like, what is the term limit, or is it just a 1 year? Is it a 2 year? Is it?
There's
no commitment at all. Enter or pull out.
So we can.
We send an email that says, hey, we're in, and they say, okay, we'll add you to the list. Decide this is uncomfortable, we can send another email. You know what? Thank you. We're out. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But yes, it is, there's no signing in blood, no.
I wonder, it's interesting, we don't really talk about this as much, and I've lived here 23 years, and definitely the demographic and psychographic of this town is changing. There's no question. And I wonder if we asked our residents what they would say. Do they think this is a city matter or not? And I tend to believe that they would want us to do something here. And again, there's no commitment. We're doing this as a matter of spirit. And I'll remind everybody, we just set 5 strategic objectives as a city for the first time. And we had to shoehorn in environmental sustainability. Does everyone remember that? We shoehorned it in. And we need to stop doing that. As long as it doesn't cost us and there isn't a business implication, which there doesn't always have to be, and this is more about what are we doing as a city to move things forward, I don't see why we wouldn't want to do this. Thank you.
I think that there doesn't seem to be any business disbenefit, but there seems to be a lot of potential benefit.
Yeah, and to your point about having to shoehorn in environmental concerns, this is something we need to work on our culture with being more thoughtful up front. It shouldn't be an afterthought. It's part of taking care of our world.
But I agree with that, but it ought to be within our own city control and purview here. So when we're joining networks of other cities, I don't have a problem participating with them, but as a formal member of a group like that, where do we draw the line between what are we trying to do as a city? What do we have control over? Because, I'll vote for a million things that don't impact El Segundo, but impact somebody else. And now I get into a situation where, am I helping the problem or am I hurting it even worse here? So I worry about things that, the things that we have control over, our managed fleet of vehicles, the businesses that are in town, are they in compliance with all the rules and regulations? Making sure that we're compliant there, I have full support of it. But again, outside of this, I don't know that we have to have a formal position as a city to participate. I agree with the whole concept of reducing emissions and everything else, but everyone, you look at some of the arbitrary reductions that get set in some of these bills that go forward, 40 and then I guess 80% emissions on greenhouse gases by 2050. The technologies that we're going to be using then haven't been invented yet, right? So how, I don't even know if that's going to be an issue or a non-issue, but it is an ongoing term out there that comes out of an effort like this that I don't know how you deal with that. And I don't know that it's really healthy to deal with those issues. So, I support reductions. I support being a community here. Just.
Can I draw an analogy?
Sure.
A month ago, I went up to Sacramento for the California League of Cities.
I was going to say,
Okay.
you may. I don't know if you can.
California League of Cities. All I'm doing there is sharing best practices, right? Same thing at council of governments. Maybe we're advocating for certain things, environmentally minded or otherwise. And I voted on a pension reform policy guideline representing the city with 49 other agencies, okay? So I don't know how this is that much different than us joining other organizations where we're trying to share best practices and move things forward. So again, there's no commitment. The administrative burden is negligible. There is, we're already exceeding the standards that this sets forth by way of California's restrictions. So to me, it's a no-brainer, but that's it.
And again, back to the opportunities, I think this network, we can give only as much as we want to give, but we can learn a lot from these other communities. If their cities have municipal efforts or initiatives or even small programs that save them money that are win-win solutions and we learn from that and we can implement them here, then that could only help us as a city as well.
Maybe we can get in the good graces of Mayor Garcetti again, Mayor. I think he's one of the founding authors of this.
Yes, yes.
So what cities locally have adopted this?
I didn't read all 138. I know Culver City's one of the recent ones.
LA, Long Beach, Santa Monica, Culver City. LA and Long Beach they're two of the first to sign on.
And how about our local coastal cities?
I
Seeing
haven't-
any of them on Manhattan or Redondo or so.
This is very new. We jumped up here very quickly after this was brought up, so they could all have this in the works as well as we know.
I guess I'll make a motion because I don't think there's any other discussion. Is that okay, Mayor? So I move that we approve. Bless you. We move to approve the. What's the terminology here? Can you help me?
Adopt the resolution.
Adopt the resolution.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Question,
Oh, yes,
I have
sir.
a question for the attorney. What's the results of an abstention around this issue? Does it count as a yes?
No.
It just
It's a no.
doesn't count?
It's a no vote. Yeah, so you would need a majority of the council to adopt the resolution, which would be 3 affirmative votes, yes.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No? Abstain?
I abstain. Get that, clerk?
Thank you. So consideration and possible action to receive and file an annual report of the Planning Commission, fiscal impact none. Is that why I see Chair Baldino here?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. Thank you for inviting me tonight. My name is Ryan Baldino. I serve on the Planning Commission. I have been on that commission since 2008. This is the first time I've been asked to come and give a report. So not quite sure what you want to talk about, but I have a bunch of things I'd like to talk to you about. I'm going to talk briefly about some of the things we've done recently that I thought have worked really well. I'll talk briefly about things that I see coming up in front of the Planning Commission that I think are big ticket items that we should be talking to people about in the community and getting their feedback now. And then I'm going to end my presentation talking about the ADUs. But let me first begin with what I have seen since my time on the commission. Since 2008, I think that overall the staff and the commission has done a very good job of becoming more proactive. When I first got on, I felt as if we were just responding to whatever was presented by an applicant and was on the agenda and doing small things here and there, but not thinking big picture or actually planning 40, 50, 70 years. One of the things that the commission did is we asked to do a downtown subcommittee to tackle the reworking of the downtown plan. And I thought that was successful. We had in various members of the community, Drew, Carol, Jay was even on it. And we were able to get recommendation authority from the city council to adjust certain items and bring in stakeholders from downtown and figure out what would work. Of that, we've made some changes. Things that haven't been done yet are the new signage for the parking, but I think that has to go through the capital improvement to find funding for that. Because one of the big issues, like Mayor Fuentes says, anytime we talk about anything, someone is going to come to our commission and complain about parking, the impact of parking this project has, how there's not enough parking. And parking downtown has always been an issue, especially with the parking in lieu. So we were able to determine a couple of things to make parking more visible through signage. We spoke with Chief Donovan, who I believe was here, and we were able to, not only did the city cut down the hedges at the lot there at Main and Grand, but they removed those parking only for the fire trucks. And so now that lot, we have new signage, will be an open invitation for parking after hours and on weekends and help open up the downtown area. The other subcommittee we had was to look at the R1 zone and modularization, and that was actually at the request of City Council. And there we had Commissioners Nichols and Neasley form another subcommittee and talk about what's working with modulation and how can that be cleaned up and simplified. And then one of the biggest things I've seen actually was what the staff presented tonight was this code cleanup. And that's the gruel of city work right there. Because when we're building and things are moving, all the things staff doing, and we're responding to people on the counter. And when things are slow is when, if you've got a good working staff, they're going to go back and say, how can we make our service better? How can we clarify things for the end user at the city? And the last time the staff had time to really clean up the code, as I did with these 50 items, was 1993. So I really want to commend staff for the work they are doing behind the scenes to make it a little bit simpler when someone comes before the counter and has a question about the code. You know, and these changes are adding more diagrams, putting definitions for things that we all know are in town, but there's no definition in our code. So it's positive for me to see that we are getting direction from the Planning Commission on items, we're getting direction from the City Council, but we also have a staff here that is taking the incentive to go out and try to streamline. Any questions about any of that? Because I'm now going to move on to talk about the things I see coming up next. Okay, the big ticket item that we're going to deal with.
I have one question,
Sure.
Ryan. Did you say we still need signage for parking?
We have signage, but it's a good mini paragraph that says no parking here, but you can park after 6. And what was proposed actually by Jay, who's a designer and urban planner as his profession, was just simplify that. Free public parking. And keep a sign with directions so that when people are coming to downtown and they're driving down Main by Rock and Brews and they see everything is crowded, there's a sign saying you can park here, you can walk a block here, you can park here. There's lots of options for you. Because I think there might be a perception that parking's really bad in downtown El Segundo, but we've got a parking lot that might be underutilized still. And one of the confusing things that people noted in the subcommittee was it says free parking and then it says 99-cent store only. Does that mean only it's free for the 99-cent store, or is it free public parking? So it should be simple, and it should say free public parking so that people coming into this town have an idea of where they can park.
Thank you for that. We'll have a question later about the parking structure.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay.
So the big thing that we'll be dealing with is the Smoky Hollow plan. And there have been a lot of meetings, a lot of public input. I'm told, and again, one of the biggest things we're going to have to deal with is what are we going to do about parking in Smoky Hollow? And since I've been on the commission, we've been doing a lot of approving projects one by one. So we have an idea of what we would like Smoky Hollow to be, this creative office environment with mixed uses and bringing in a lot of new businesses to replace that light, heavy manufacturing that really isn't there anymore. And that's where we saw a lot of use of the research and development. So we would get a plan in, it would come before the commission, it would have parking satisfied only because they have triple tandem parking. And the only thing that would really be before the commission is, well, can we move the loading zone from here to here? And the questions we would have is this parking plan legitimate? And what are we going to do to enforce the fact that we're being told 8,000 square feet is research and development and only 800 is for office? Because if all 8,800 was office, we would require and we would get much more parking. And so we've been dealing with those just kind of piecemeal, and it's going to create a bigger problem. So I'm happy to see the city has been engaged in trying to redesign the specific plan for Smoky Hollow so we can have a real conversation about what are we going to do about parking. I understand it might be some type of parking in lieu program, but something has to be done for us to prepare because Smoky Hollow is changing already. And we have to get ahead of that and plan for it because the kind of spot zoning we've been doing is not going to work out well in the long run. So I've been told that this is going to come before the Planning Commission in November and probably before the City Council in December of this year. Which brings me back to one more point I forgot to raise. One of the things I also think staff has done a lot better recently is just getting the word out to the public. It used to just be a posting in the Herald, and people would only ask me about things that came before the commission after they already read about it in the Herald. So city staff has been out at farmers market with surveys. They're trying to use Facebook to get on ESPN because that's the only thing people read in this town. But it's important to encourage, more activity and more response for people just to come and tell us what they think. The next big item we see, we've got Top Golf coming up again in August. And then we're also going to be dealing with short-term rentals, the Airbnbs, and how those are affecting the cities. So Smoky Hollow is obviously going to be the big one. But there's also a lot of planning going on with the Planning Commission about how are we going to prepare the city as we move forward. Any questions about that?
Ryan, thanks so much. You're a great orator. You must do this for a living.
I try to.
Ryan, the parking, you mentioned parking in Smoky Hollow. We also, when we did those workshops, we were looking at one-way, angle parking, back-in versus pull-in was very controversial. But is that part of the November, or is that likely to come?
That's part of the overall plan.
Okay.
Talking about trying to put parking on El Segundo Boulevard. But then we got to work in, well, is there going to be a bike path in there? How is that going to work? So the meeting's coming up. We're going to try to look at Smoky Hollow as a whole.
Good.
There's a lot of interesting things going on in Smoky Hollow. And if you'll know from the art walk, a lot of these places are being used as venues, and they're advertising it. We are, have your prom here, have an office party here. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying we have to get ahead of that and figure out how are we going to make sure that they're using valet parking or they're pulling a permit if they're going to be late night. But if you drive around Smoky Hollow, there's a lot of interesting things going on there, and a lot of them aren't allowed under this code.
Right.
So, again, I'm in big favor of seeing what happens in Smoky Hollow and what we can do there, but we got to be in front of it. We can no longer continue just to kind of take one applicant at a time that's going to convert some abandoned building into a research and development office and just hope parking will work out. So more parking on the streets, maybe angled parking, all those things are going to be up.
And FARs was a big heated discussion as well. Is that coming up as well?
I believe it'll all be part of it.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, this has been a conversation we've had for years. I kind of stuttered and stopped, but I think now we have the staffing with Sam and Greg to really kind of tackle these big issues and bring them before the commission and before the city council so that we can have the discussion and make these decisions. Your question, Mike?
Just a general one here. We all talk about, having a new review of our planning, city planning,
Or
general plan. Is that on anybody's radar screen here?
That is on my list.
Well, I thought we approved in our strategic planning, we approved funds to begin that.
Okay.
What you directed staff to do this year is develop a plan for when we can start the effort and how much it would cost and where the additional funds may come from.
But we had, 300,000 set aside or more?
Right, and we believe it's going to be over $1 million project, so the question then is how do we fund that gap, or when do we start, or are there other city funds that we can use for that purpose and then pay those funds back through the general plan surcharge that we collect? So you'll be hearing about that from planning and building soon.
You're going to be busy.
The city is very busy, which is a good thing. Well, that brings me to the last thing. I want to take this opportunity and talk to you about the ADUs. This came before the Planning Commission. We had 4 separate hearings. The reason we had to even discuss this is because of the state law, which required you to convert pre-existing or subdivide your home. That was going to preempt what the city already had on the books. Now, the state had done this previously. They tried to regulate housing at a state level, and what we did locally is we put enough restrictions on it to where these ADUs were only allowed in about 15 of the R1. They had to be next to a commercial, and you had to provide parking. The state says you can't provide parking anymore. But what the state doesn't say, the state does not say the city has to allow the construction of new ADUs. The state law only says you have to allow to convert a pre-existing into an ADU or allow someone to subdivide their home. When this first was presented, we were told that based on the state law at that time, at that first meeting, it would include garages. And anyone would be allowed to come in and take their garage and make it an ADU, and we could not require any additional parking. So it was presented as the lesser of two evils. Why not allow people to build a new structure and maybe we can save the garage? Because, again, everything we deal with on the commission comes back to a lack of parking. Once there was a bill, and the city and staff, we continued it because we were told there's possible legislation which will clarify and eliminate the garages. And that legislation did come through. And then we were told, well, we don't have to apply it to garages. The ADU will be a conversion of your pool house. Fine, great. But then we've had so many people, maybe 20 people or so, come and tell us about why they need an ADU. And of course, they all have good reasons. So what the Planning Commission did is we developed a compromise.
we said it makes sense if you live in an alley and you've got a garage, why can't you slap an ADU on the top? As long as it's attached to the garage, it won't be that bad of an impact. That's the commission's recommendation that we came to after 4 hearings of taking public testimony. And it's not going to work for everyone, but what it does, it kind of mitigates where these things can be built by saying that there's no state requirement to allow to build up to 1,200 square feet. That was just the subdivision. To say that you can build anywhere on your property without having it attached up to 1,200 square feet turns the R1 into an R2. We cannot stop this. Once you give this second reading on AE, there's no going back. There's no reporting back in 4 months when people come in with building permits and start erecting 1,200 square foot new property for rental purposes in someone's backyard. You can't take that property right away. It's too late. So I urge you to pull this consent item and have a conversation about if you really want El Segundo to turn into a different town, because since 2008, I've not seen anything come before the Planning Commission that could dramatically change what this town is. This can do that. This can let rental housings be developed on any lot that has room to build, and they will build. And sure, some people have genuine good reasons for wanting to have an in-law unit. But that doesn't mean that if you allow that, you have to allow everyone to build for whatever reason they want to. So I ask you again to really consider what you're doing, because once you approve this now, there is no going back to the way it was before. And again, I just want to make it very clear, the state does not require us to allow new ADUs. The people in this room are making that decision. Questions about that?
I agree completely, so I have no questions.
I know.
This is an agenda item, so what I would recommend is
Okay,
if
we
the
won't
council
have
has
it.
any comments, probably pull the item.
Thank you,
Well,
David.
I have it highlighted in green, circled in red. So.
Those are the comments. I want to thank you.
I
first.
got one question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that last topic is one of the most significant to face our town, but I think even more significant might be housing east side of Sepulveda, and you didn't mention that at all. We've been talking about it up here at the dais. It's been talked about a lot on ESPN, the channel you referred to earlier. What are your thoughts in terms of addressing that? Because that to me is a made like absolutely significant shift in this town potentially, right? Even more so than ADUs. ADUs are going to exist in residentially zoned areas.
Yes.
So just what is the planning committee? What's the timeline on that? How is that part of the general plan that Mike mentioned earlier? When are we addressing that?
That is a conversation I think the city needs to have, and it's probably best held before the Planning Commission. But it would have to be basically a rezoning of that commercial area, just like we're doing with Smoky Hollow now. We'd have to completely rewrite that code to allow mixed-use residential or even residential. And then we got to deal with police and fire and services. You basically got a new high school on that side of town. Those kids will be going to a different school district. So it is a conversation that we should have, but I haven't had any inclination from staff that this is coming up on the agenda within the next 6 months or a year. And if
Greg or Sam, can you comment on that? So I know we've been talking about it a lot. I just want to know, is this part of the general plan? Or like we're going to address the city at large? Or are we going to do more of this kind of spot zoning like we're doing for Smoky Hollow?
Well, I think our recommendation has always been that something that significant would be part of a broader general plan effort. And if we are able to undertake an update to our general plan in the next 1.5 to 2 years, and that is the perfect place for that to occur, and the Planning Commission's key to a general plan update.
So 2020, 2021, best case scenario.
I'd like to think that we're pursuing some grant options to fund part of the general plan effort, so I'd like to think that we could get it started in 1.5 years, possibly.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan.
Sure. I was just going to thank you for the opportunity, not only to serve on the commission, but just to come have a conversation. I appreciate the service all of you guys do and the hard work you do, and I know it's not easy being up there because everyone has their own opinions and their own interests, and it's up to you guys to make sure that what's being done in this room is really in the best interest of the entire city of El Segundo.
Thank you. Well, Ryan, I want to thank you and the other commissioners. You are so proactive. I served with you probably back in 2008, and it was a different planning commission back then, I think we would call it the Approval Commission. And,
Yeah.
you know, it was hard to have really thoughtful conversations and throw ideas out there. And you've done a tremendous job leading this with the other commissioners. So thank you for your time and your thoughtfulness and caring about El Segundo and how it is now and where it's going.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we've got a really good mix on the Planning Commission. We don't agree, which is exactly what you want. People have different backgrounds and different ideas. And, you know, we just host a public forum to take the input and have a conversation and hopefully make the right decision. So again, thank you guys.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the consent agenda. Any polls?
I need to pull item 6. We'll have the minutes for you on the next agenda.
I didn't hear the last thing you said about it. Pull it? Okay. Yeah, pull and continue.
I was going to pull number 8, but I know that you were going to pull it as well.
Yes. So you're pulling 8, and I'd like to pull item 10.
I'll pull 9, please. Should be a short one.
So do I have a motion to approve item number 5? 7.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. So item number 6 is going to continue. So item number 8,
Sure.
you would read it, please?
Consideration and possible action regarding environmental assessment, number EA 1177, zone text amendment number ZTA 16-06 regarding accessory dwelling units, ADUs, in residential zones. Adopting this ordinance is statutorily exempt from further environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act, California Public Resource Code 2100. CEQA and CEQA guidelines. 14, because it involves the adoption of an ordinance regarding accessory dwelling units in a single-family or multifamily residential zone to implement the provisions of Government Code Section 65852.2 as set forth in Section 2108.0.17 of Public Resource Code pursuant to CEQA guidelines number 15282H, applicant City of the El Segundo. Fiscal impact, none. So I wanted to pull this because I do not agree with the recommended assessment here. I would believe I was in favor of adopting what the Planning Commission had presented to us to allow 800 square foot residential ADUs on top of a garage. And I believe that allowing residents to build a detached building of up to 1,200 square feet would really alter, without requiring any parking, would alter our city. And I believe that we already have parking issues on our streets, and that neighbors would now all of a sudden we'd have become duplex land where there would be a lot of duplexes on our streets, and I think that's unfair to the other residents of the town.
Well, I share Councilmember Perstek's concerns. I've said here on every occasion I can, it will change the character of El Segundo. I do believe sincerely there are people who want to add something to their house to have a family member, and I understand. But I also wonder what will happen when those people move. Then there's rental units, and it's only increasing demand for parking in our town, and there will virtually be no R1 anymore. The state has taken that away from us, and there are cities in the state that have just refused and voted 5-0 to not approve it. And I don't know if they're waiting for somebody in the state to sue them or not, but I stand by the Planning Commission's recommendations. As you heard from Chair Baldino, a lot of thought went into it, a lot of time. They didn't do that in a vacuum. They had 4 public hearings, and I still support their recommendations. Thank you.
In addition, after talking to our city manager, by doing this, we're actually putting a lot of pressure on our infrastructure as far as our services, our sewers, our a fire, our police, and there is no additional revenue to cover those costs. So that burden will go to everybody else. I really think that these types of decisions are big enough that we should put it on a ballot if we really want to, on a citywide ballot for the residents to vote on, because I feel it's unfair for us to make this big of a change to our city with 5 people.
I can say that listening to Ryan discuss the issue of detachable units versus ones that are on existing garages was a different flavor than what kind of I interpreted from what we were being given from the staff as far as what was granted by the state and what was going to be allowed. You know, it was almost like it had to be allowed perspective. So I heard a little different story today from you, Ryan. So there's a different basis for decision on this based on what you said versus based on what we heard through staff reporting. Those aren't in complete alignment to me anyhow. I don't know if that's anybody else has seen it that way, but
No, I remember the staff represented the same way, Mike. I just, we had this discussion, if you recall, about all the properties in town that have garages on the front of the property, and that would be at a significant disadvantage to do anything if they didn't have a detached ADU, and if that was fair or not. And then there was really, we only changed 2 things, going from 800 to 1,200 allowable square footage and detached as opposed to on top of a garage or attached to a garage. And my position stands. I think parking's a more significant issue that we can address different ways, and I think car ownership will drop in the future, so I'm not as concerned about that. I think we have to contend with some of the employers and LAX and the other causes of parking issues in our town, address those issues first.
the parking issue doesn't go away if you put one on top of a garage, correct? So.
I move that we adopt ordinance number 1550.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
No. Thank you. Item number 9, you pulled, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, just a quick question on item 9. Sorry, Chief. Consideration and possible action authorizing the fire department to purchase a new 2017 Ford CMax Hybrid SE from Airport Marina Ford for use within the Environmental Safety Division. Just simple question, any consideration of a plug-in as opposed to just straight hybrid?
No, sir, we did not consider the plug-in. We did consider the hybrid. We thought that was an appropriate purchase, but certainly a good point.
Just minor one, but, you know, being electric, new fan of electric vehicles. And
Yeah, I was thinking we were going to get a carbureted vehicle, but they don't make those anymore. So, easy.
Yeah.
This is a big step forward.
I still have one. I still got a 1995 4Runner.
There you go. Yes, sir.
Just something maybe to consider
Yes,
in
sir.
the future, if not for this one. Please, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Did you want to move to? Yeah.
So I'll move to approve item 9.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No. Wasn't on the plan, was it?
Oh.
Yeah, still. It's not part of our annual plan. We ought to be doing it on an annual plan.
Can I ask just a quick question? I know we already voted, Mayor. May I? Chief, the Coupa funds, can you remind us what those can be used for specifically?
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is the Certified Unified Participating Agency. It's a state term for our hazardous material environmental safety program. We receive funds through businesses that process, manufacture, store, and distribute hazardous materials. The funds that we collect through the normal regulatory process, business licensing, and fines are set into a special Coupa fund. Those funds, those revenues can only be used for support of the Coupa program. Staffing, vehicles, equipment, hardware, software for the computer programs and things of that like. So the funding that we'll be using for the purchase of this vehicle will be from the Coupa program, which is separate and aside from the general fund. So there'll be no general fund impact with this purchase.
Jeez. How much approximately is in that fund, Chief?
We collect about $280,000 right now. We are going to use a special account that has about $72,000 in fines that have been accumulated over the many years. And
this is an appropriate use of the fines for the purchase of this vehicle.
Thank you.
Okay, and I pulled item number 10, consideration and possible action to enter into a professional services agreement in a form approved by the city attorney with Jeff Cason Productions to support various design and creative services related to Celebrate, the Centennial Fireworks Projection and Lighting Show taking place on October 7, 2017. Fiscal impact $34,467 from Centennial Celebration donations, 0 from the general fund. A couple questions. Is this amount included in the, I believe it was $109,000 that we approved? Yes, so our Director of Recreation and Parks, Meredith Pettit, is approaching the microphone.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is not anything different than the Centennial Committee has already reviewed and approved. It's just a mechanism for Jeff Cason, the event producer, to subcontract certain components of the event and pay them in a more timely manner than the city.
Thank you. And then I just have one comment. He is going to write the script, and he is very talented, and this is going to be a fabulous show. But I would like some sort of city approval or somebody from the Library History Committee to co-author the script with him so that it's historically accurate. So we could add that. Pardon? Where we find somebody? Well, I'm sure from the Library Historical Committee, so.
Sure, we can involve them. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, I move approval.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. New business, consideration and possible action regarding a request from the Alzheimer's Association to operate a beer garden at Campus El Segundo Athletic Fields as a component of the annual fundraising event Go for Gold football game on Saturday, July 15th, 2017, from 5 to 10 p.m. Fiscal impact none. City Manager?
Meredith Pettit, our Director of Parks and Recreation, will make this presentation.
Thank you very much. This item is in front of you. We've received a request. We were originally processing a facility reservation form, and as things developed, we were in discussions with Alzheimer's of Greater Los Angeles, and they've requested to add a beer garden component to an event that they're holding, a charity event over at Campus El Segundo. It's on a Saturday, July 15th. We do have representatives from the organization here tonight if you do have specific questions. And I did want to make a clarification that they've made me aware of. The organization name is technically Alzheimer's Greater Los Angeles, and the event is called Tackle ALZ. And again, this is a charity flag football game taking place at Campus El Segundo on a Saturday evening. They are renting one of the fields currently from 5 to 10 p.m. And this is a big fundraising event for them. And again, typically our municipal code doesn't allow alcohol to be consumed or served on park property. So this would be at the approval of the city council to allow them to do that. I have made a recommendation, which is up for discussion, just in conversations with my staff about the possibility of having them really reserve the entire facility so as to avoid any sort of conflict with any drop-in programs or have any last-minute reservations that we may not feel comfortable with making that reservation due to any sort of conflicting activities. The site plan is included in your packet, and again, we do have representatives here if you have other questions.
I just have one question. So it says a beer garden. Is it just beer and wine?
Yes.
And then is the event just for 21 and older, or is it a family event and the beer garden will be cordoned off? Like, what's the...
Correct, yeah. From my understanding, it is a family event, so families come with their children, but in our conversation, I have asked that they do cordon off the actual beer serving location, much like we do for Richmond Street Fair.
So they would only be able to drink the alcohol within that cordoned off area?
Correct.
Dr. Brand?
Have there been other exceptions made at the corporate campus fields in the past, and for what types of causes?
I've never received this request for that facility.
What differences from normal policy have we had? I recall the Richmond Street Fair.
Richmond Street Fair on an annual basis hosts a beer garden. And there was, from my understanding, I think 2 of the years at Hometown Fair, also there was a beer garden. It wasn't really a lucrative fundraiser, and I think that's part of the reason why that no longer exists at Hometown Fair. I think Campus El Segundo is a bit of a unique facility versus something like Library Park or Recreation Park because, typically we like to keep the parks open for general public usage and drop-in use and like to have a little bit more access and availability for that type of activity. But Campus El Segundo, I think, is different in that if the entire facility is reserved, it's something that I believe that is something we can accommodate for this particular facility.
Through this event, how did they raise funds? Is this the main component to raising funds? Is the drinking of alcohol, or are there ticket prices? I'm not sure how this works.
Yeah, I don't know. I would ask one of the representatives to come up and answer that one.
Good evening, council members. Yes, to answer your question, sir, the primary funds are actually raised through the players in the game. So this is an all-women's flag football event, and so they fundraise for about 3 months leading up to this game. And so to answer your question about the revenues and how the money from the beer garden would be used, this would just be actually a very small percentage of the revenues from the game. As for those of you who are involved in nonprofit organizations, the competition for awareness and eyeballs and engagement with potential donors is very steep. So this is just one small step that we hope to take in order to expand the event, upgrade it, and provide that little bit of extra service for those people who are coming in and supporting our mission.
Sir, can you just state your name for the record?
Sorry, Chris Oshie. I'm with Alzheimer's Greater Los Angeles.
So as you probably know, I'm always a consistent vote for no alcohol in our public areas, and you were probably told that ahead of time. Alzheimer's Association is a wonderful group. I've done the memory walk for years, and that it's a horrid disease, and it is indeed the long goodbye. But opening up to outside organizations, especially, I think, creates a slippery slope.
Yeah, I just learned recently that if you live beyond the age of 80, there's a 1 in 2 chance you'll develop Alzheimer's. Scary stat. However, I love the idea of the event, the alcohol thing, as much as I love a good beer garden. I coach soccer out there. I just get a little concerned about beer, wine spilling, and just the kids are going to be there the next morning or afterwards, so potentially. I'd prefer not to have the beer and wine on site. There's a way to do it, like at the Lakers facility right next door, to get them to co-sponsor a great cause like this, or somewhere else adjacent. I would prefer that.
On parking lot.
Yeah, even the parking lot, just not in Campus El Segundo, is kind of a sacred ground in my mind a little bit.
Any other comments? Do we have a
I think it's a great idea. I think we have concerns about whether or not we can introduce a beer garden at any of our events around here, and all I hear is the downside of it, and it just seems like we never get an opportunity to see would that have worked and how much of an impact is it. I think this is a great opportunity to give it a try. It's at campus, it's on the field, the soccer field's over at campus, so I think this is a great opportunity to give it a try. I don't think there's a downside to it following days or anything like that, as long as it's well managed. And this may be something that we can demonstrate that this is a potential good use of our facilities, and it'll go to a good cause. So I think it's a great idea. I fully support it.
We have a motion?
Thank you, Councilmember. I think one of the things that we are very excited about is not only that we spent literally weeks and months looking for a field that not only was safe for the players, was a little bit removed from residential areas, and offered parking, and then the fact that you've invested so much into this facility and added the lights. We were very, very excited about hopefully being part of the El Segundo community for a long time. and we're certainly looking at this as the annual home. Regardless of how you vote tonight, we definitely see this as something that we want to bring back to El Segundo for many years. And yes, I appreciate your endorsement. I certainly appreciate the help and support of Meredith and the police department and the fire department, all of whom have signed off on this.
It's just final thought, like, also, we're about to spend $1 million on a new camp, on a new turf. And I know that it would be sectioned off, but having experienced Gatorade and other things on that field, beer, sticky, I can't get my head around the idea. I have a problem with it. So if there's a way to do it adjacent, I'd even sponsor your beer. I think it's a great event, and you can hold me to that. I'm just saying that I don't want it on the field, that's all.
Fair enough.
When are we changing that field? When's that scheduled? This event is July.
A month after it, right? Or
Right, so we actually have programs scheduled through July 23rd and plan to close about the 24th if everything's still on schedule. The beer garden would be on the concrete portion, which is a rule that we always enforce for food and drink at Campus El Segundo as much as we can. And regarding any sort of damages or leftover materials, with any reservation, we do take a security deposit and we make sure that the place is clean. We put resources out there and make sure that we charge for those.
But if the place gets trashed, then I understand the field's going to be ripped up and replaced a week or so later.
Correct.
Right?
So
That's pretty good timing.
So we could do a test case.
No. And the fees, the organizations paid the fees, because the more they have to pay in fees, the less profit they can make for the great cause.
Correct. So this organization is is on the non-resident organization rate, and they are paying $165 an hour per field. So if the council desires that they reserve the other field, it's another $900 to $1,000.
They don't need the other field, but your concept is to not let this event go on and then have some other event on the other field. You're trying to block that, right?
Right, or just have general public in and out, just knowing that it's most likely youth or teenagers, and just to sort of reduce that mixing possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that requirement's only if there's alcohol.
Correct.
So they have to decide if they're going to make more than the $1,000 on the alcohol to reserve the other side of the field.
yeah, I'm not in favor of making them reserve the other side. You know, let's assume they're responsible and they can manage it here. So.
And that's fine too. I think that was thrown out as a recommendation if that was a concern of the council.
Well, how often is that field used on a Saturday from 5 to 9?
This time of year, the calendar has been clear.
So I mean, there's not a lot of activity there on a Saturday night from 5 to 9?
No.
Do we have a motion?
I move that we allow beer and wine. We'll give it a run, see how it goes this year, and we require them to secure both fields.
You want to waive the fee on one field?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. Have a good event.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Item number 12, consideration and possible action regarding options for streetscape and landscape improvements along Main Street and Grand Avenue in downtown El Segundo, and upgrading 2 part-time park maintenance worker positions to full-time park maintenance worker positions. Fiscal impact $30,000 to $140,000 from parks salaries.
And Madam Mayor, members of the council, the record should reflect that Councilmember Persick and also City Manager Carpenter have recused themselves because they own property within the DSP zone.
Thank you. We have.
Carpenter's not voting. Why does he get to leave?
So he doesn't influence us.
Yeah, he can't influence the decision if
Sit
I
there
own.
quiet. He can sit there quiet.
So once again, we have our department manager, Meredith Pettit.
Thank you very much. So this item is before you. I think there's been a lot of conversation about downtown El Segundo lately, and particularly Main Street and some of the streetscape areas. As you know, downtown El Segundo is the heart of this town. Many people claim the small town charm as the main reason why they live here or visit El Segundo, or something that surprises new visitors when they come to our downtown. Richmond Street recently underwent a major renovation. But Main Street was renovated back in 2004, and as a component of that renovation, trees and planters were installed. The plant material is now over 13 years old, and much of it has diminished due to varying reasons. A lot of it has to do with the age of the plant material, the location of the plant material. As you know, if you park there on Main Street, a lot of times when you open your car door, you might hit a planter or walk through a planter. So our planters have definitely seen the results of things like that. There's been quite a bit of conversation among business owners, residents, city council, and staff on the need to address some of the tired-looking areas of Main Street, including the landscaping. A much larger streetscape capital improvement project could be discussed during strategic planning, but the Recreation and Parks Department has explored options for making some more immediate action and updates regarding the landscaping. The Parks Division has recently updated the landscaping at both the police and fire stations on Main Street, and are more than capable of selecting and installing plant materials similar to those new areas, while still aesthetically cohesively designing it with the current Main Street palette. We propose utilizing savings from park salaries. We've had some vacancies over the past fiscal year, and our year-end estimations show that we'll be probably about $140,000 under in the park salaries budget. We can purchase over 2,400 plants for $13,575 is what we've costed out. And that was after a review of the many blocks of Grand Avenue and Main Street, and taking a look at where the vacant areas are and really trying to place where new plant material could go. The project would take about 3 weeks and employ a 4-man crew, including 1 supervisor. The staff costs for that project would be absorbed into the current budget as well. This is in comparison to a proposal. We wanted to provide you a comparison from our landscape contractor, who quoted $26,000 for installing just under 1,000 new plants. Additionally, there are 58 poles throughout downtown designed for hanging flower baskets. The recurring cost and time consumption of replanting and rehanging those baskets, along with state-mandated water restrictions, have made the live hanging baskets difficult to maintain. You may have noticed coming in, but we did purchase 2 sample artificial flower hanging baskets that were just hung this afternoon. And so they're available for you to look at if you want to. But one option could be to purchase these artificial flower hanging baskets. It would instantly add color and greenery overhead on Main Street. They're about $200 each, and it's an economical approach to enhancing the aesthetics of downtown. The Parks Division currently is responsible for maintaining over 60 acres of park space and medians, and do so through a combination of in-house employees as well as a landscape contractor. Over the years, the areas of responsibility have increased, while the staff resources have decreased. The Parks Division is faced with trying to cover more ground with fewer crew members. This has posed some challenges of staying ahead of maintenance issues. When an irrigation leak is reported, the supervisor must call crew workers off their routine maintenance functions to handle higher priority situations. Approved in the current fiscal year 16-17 budget was the cost associated with upgrading 2 part-time park maintenance workers from part-time to full-time. These were 2 of the quote-unquote parking lot positions. The Parks Division and subsequently the residents and visitors of our public spaces could greatly benefit from those additional 20 hours of work per week. It would allow the superintendent and supervisors to more effectively deploy their resources to address routine maintenance as well as special projects such as the downtown landscape project. With that, I'll answer any questions that you have. I also have our park superintendent, Mark Trujillo, here tonight. He can answer any specific landscaping questions.
So I heard a rumor that we might invest in a high-pressure washer to keep the streets clean, or the sidewalks clean.
That would be very beneficial in a lot of areas if that were true.
Well, I think this has been an important issue for council and all the people that you name, that Main Street is our heart and soul in our downtown, and we want it to be attractive and inviting.
Yeah, I agree. It's long overdue. I almost look at these as two issues, Meredith. One is, I think we need to spend some money to get this. You have the funds set aside in your budget. It sounds like we've allocated those funds. We just need to reallocate them to get this place looking beautified. We've heard from downtown merchants, Ryan's group, many different groups, just how bad it looks out here. It's not appealing. But when I look at the staffing item, I'd rather address that in the budget session that's coming up when we look at the bigger picture and all the moving parts of the city. And we're going into strategic plan. Is that next week? I think it's next week to start the process, or soon. Anyway, so I'd rather split the issues and get the funds, the $40,575, excuse me, to address these short-term needs. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I agree. I see them as two separate issues, and we got another agenda topic item to add a couple other people into the Parks and Rec side of it too, so that they all ought to come out of the strategic planning side of this. So I'd like to split them up and deal with them in two separate items. That's a great idea.
In the meantime, an idea for, you were talking about vegetation and hanging baskets with artificial plants. Another thing I'd like us to consider is banners hanging from those street signs. I know Torrance has a wonderful program for hometown heroes, the people who live in Torrance who serve in the military, and it would be nice maybe to come up with something similar for our town. We do have Los Angeles Air Force Base here. We have a lot of veterans and active duty who live in El Segundo. Our mayor pro tem is a veteran of the United States Navy. And even if it were something with art that the Arts and Cultural Committee could think of that we could intersperse, but I think I know they would take less upkeep than trying to maintain plants and keep them alive. So.
I know that Public Works, Ken Berkman, has been part of this discussion as well, and possibly has some recommendations for other non-landscape related improvements along Main Street. The poles themselves, there's the hanging baskets that, like I said, if you would like us to try the artificial baskets, you can see the cost in the staff report. We can either move forward with that or not. The poles themselves are also in need of refurbishment, and the Public Works Department did obtain a preliminary quote for that, and it's probably about $80,000 just to refurbish the poles themselves. That's taking them down, repainting them.
Can we put the LED solar lights on them like we have on Richmond Street?
They can be retrofitted, and then the light fixtures would be an additional cost to that. So I think, the landscaping piece is one thing that we can move forward with, and if the city council would like to discuss a much broader improvement project for Main Street, then that would be something that we would want to take a little bit of time to do with the Public Works Department.
So do you want to make a motion for something?
Yeah, just one other thought too. I know that Neil Cadman and some others Brenda Newman had been meeting in like an ad hoc committee of sorts. Any momentum on that recently that you're aware of? Because I know they had similar concerns and they wanted to bring some ideas to bear about improving Main Street.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the status of that group is, but I think it would be a great group to involve.
Okay, because I know that when Ryan's group put together that downtown task force that Jay was on, that was really effective because the people in the room were people like Neil and others that had Brenda that had vested interest in Main Street specifically. So if we could involve them, I think that'd be great.
Absolutely. And we've seen other examples in other cities of downtown merchants actually tending to the land in front of their place as well. So that's something that could be discussed.
And I know we have some merchants downtown who do that already.
Correct.
Maintain that space. So do you want a motion for it all to come back, or?
No, I'm confused on one part, Meredith. The silk baskets that are hanging out there, is that part of the 40,000 that you're asking for?
That is part of the 40,000. So the to do just the plant material, basically purchasing plant material, installing it in the vacant areas, doing some excavating of some plant material out there that needs to go, is the $13,575. And then hanging baskets are $200 each, so about $27,000.
Okay.
To try that program.
I got you. Oh, thank you very much. So I would move that we approve the $13,574 for the planter work, and then maybe involve some downtown merchant to figure out what they want to do, silk, flowers, or whatever else. But I feel like that group will want the planters, don't you think? The flower work.
I would think they do, but I can't speak for them, so we have a merchant in the back.
Where's Brenda when you need her?
She sent a letter in here today.
Pardon?
She sent a letter on this topic in here today. Did you get it?
No.
'Cause she wrote it Sunday.
Oh, I missed
I
it.
gave it to the clerk this morning.
She's trying to hide. She's
It was
back there.
for all of you.
Can we ask her to weigh in? Is that appropriate?
Well, I mean, do you need our approval to go forward tonight? Is it pressing, or can we come back in a week or two and ask for some options in addition to what you've provided us? Our planning commissioner, Brenda Newman, just came in. You are a business owner downtown, and we're making decisions about downtown right now, and the mayor pro tem had a question.
They didn't
Yeah, it was
see
just-
the letter.
Yeah, I don't think we got the letter you sent, Brenda, but we're contemplating this roughly 13,000 and change to redo the planter boxes and make the flower beds and all that look good, better on Main Street. And I would like some reassurance that the majority of merchants on downtown think that that's the appropriate use of funds.
I think it's a terrific idea that we form a committee, or that there's a committee that's formed just for this reason, to discuss it, to go further, to come back for your approval. But I think clearly there's no question something needs to be done. I really can't speak to the the planters out here. I think it's a really interesting short-term solution. I don't know that it's really the thing in my head. They get dirty very quickly. I don't think faux flowers, silk flowers are really the thing for our downtown community. I'd probably encourage other ideas. I like art installations. I like the retrofitting of the lights, like what is up on Standard Street, I think, or rather Richmond Street. I think that would create tremendous continuity throughout the downtown. There's 58 light poles. I know that that's come before CPAC, and I think that would be a tremendous asset to creating a really unique feeling within the downtown. But there's a really important issue, and I think that needs to, we need to develop that, all the ideas, and I putting together a subcommittee. I'm happy to participate, get some of the other merchants to participate and come back before that. I think is a great idea.
Thank you, and I agree, and I appreciate, and I think everyone here wants to do something to improve Main Street, and instead of approving that right now, I like the approach of getting a committee of stakeholders together and coming and making recommendations to us so we do the right thing. I really appreciate everything that you have done, Meredith, with your staff and Mark to come up with ideas, but, we don't spend money easily here.
Good game plan so that you've got the sidewalks clean, that there's this good maintenance program so everything is kept and it really looks, because this is a jewel. Downtown is a jewel. And I apologize, I dropped the letters off today to the manager's assistant. I handed them to her for you all to get them and address them. So
It is a busy day in El Segundo,
Yes,
so
indeed it was.
We had a meeting at 5, and then when I went through, I saw the envelope in the tray, but we didn't have a chance to see it after. If you brought it around 5 o'clock, we'd never see it. So
It was earlier today. It was much earlier today,
Yes.
but
So-
real good.
But thank you
Thank
for
you.
caring about our town. So Meredith, what is an immediate need?
Well, I think it's just a matter of if you want to include an entire landscaping review in a much broader conversation, or if you want to go ahead and allow us to sort of take some money from an already under budget line item, utilize it in a more immediate way to at least do what we can do. to plant more plants. And I think that's something that we need to do anyway, to be honest. I think that there's a lot of dead space out there in the planters. The challenge really is that, are they really going to survive? Just because of the design of the planters and people walking through them and opening their doors into them, it's going to be a constant battle of replacing those plants. And but we're up to the challenge and at least making it look better for the short term.
So what are you looking for us today immediately? Anything, or can we come back with a plan? And by we, I mean you and the ad hoc subcommittee.
I don't know if I definitely need anything from you tonight. I think that as far as the utilization of $13,000 is probably not something that council needs to approve or not approve. So I think we can certainly include landscaping in a much broader conversation and groups on that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you to all of your staff. We could bring back Carol and our city manager. Welcome back. Okay, item number 13, consideration and possible action to waive all city fees supporting the 2017 Main Street Car Show. Fiscal impact, approximately $1,625 in additional fee waivers. City manager.
Mayor, members of council, staff is recommending a fee waiver, but a fee waiver of 75% of the applicable fees. The request from the chamber was that 100% of the fees be waived, and based on the policy that council adopted several years back, that is not consistent with the rating criteria that we use. So staff is recommending denial of the request for 100% fee waiver and supports the 75% fee waiver that our policy supports. And Meredith Pettit can answer any questions that you have around the
We're getting tired.
around the
of her.
established criteria.
It's been Meredith Pettit week. So,
And just to clarify,
Let's get a resolution for her.
I should add, last year the city found itself in a position where the car show may not occur. And in order to address that, the city co-sponsored, along with the chamber, the car show, and we did not charge a fee to ourselves as a co-sponsor, but hopefully the car show is back in good hands and is moving forward as a fundraising event for the nonprofit organizations again.
okay. So I have some concerns. What you said is true. The Police Officers Association used to run this, and then last year, for whatever reasons, they decided not to, and the chamber took it over with the city. And the chamber worked very hard, and we partnered with them to cover some of those costs. Now, the Police Officers Association is going to do it with the chamber. The chamber is a not-for-profit and has 2 employees. The Police Officers Association is a union and has maybe 60 employees. So they have money, they have dues, they get donations from people. They also, as I've said here before, interjected themselves in the last election a lot. So I am willing to waive the chamber parts of the fees, but I am not willing to waive what would be the POA portion. They have money.
What is the number here? On the face sheets, it says 1625, but when you go back to the item, it talks 1465. What's the correct number? Is it just a typo?
The number is 1465. That's an estimated number. Not sure where the 1600 is.
You see where I'm saying under 13? What do you call those sheets, clerk?
It's
those
the
fake
agenda,
sheets, or-
13 in the agenda. The agenda and the staff report don't match.
That's what I'm saying.
The staff report is correct.
Okay.
Yep, there was a double count of one of the numbers.
Do we know approximately how much money's made on one of these car shows by the POA? Do they make 5,000 or?
Is there anyone here from the POA
Anybody know?
to speak to this?
I was told last year made about $7,000.
Hmm.
Net or gross? Like after their expenses or net?
Correct.
Now, and POA wasn't involved in that one, right?
Correct.
It's because last year, 2 people and a lot of volunteers did that.
Yeah.
Because
So-
we have page
Is the
160.
ADM involved in it?
Yes,
Yes.
they were last year.
And so one of the things we have to be cognizant of is that the last meeting I attended, so the beginning of June, we waive fees on a for-profit company because under the guise of economic development.
Mm-hmm.
This car show is definitely about economic development and bringing people to our town and bringing businesses to our businesses. So we approved the one. It would be, to be consistent, we really need to prove this one. So that's why I was against the previous one, because I said you have a slippery slope. But now we have another situation where this is a nonprofit is coming to bring business to our town, asking for waivers.
It is not a nonprofit.
But the half of it is. So it's a joint partnership between the two organizations, and it's something that our city has embraced, and we've been doing this for a long time. Would you consider the fee be in lieu of the sponsorship, as you did with the previous company that you approved in the beginning of June as a Centennial sponsorship?
They didn't end up paying any fees, right?
Correct.
Corporate Games at Richmond Street?
Correct.
You warned us that night.
Yes.
Just an update on that. Not that it makes a difference. That the vote was the vote. Is that the corporate games didn't actually occur? They
Yeah,
weren't-
but regardless,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Just
we set a precedent.
wanted to provide that update.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I think the difference is the city technically a sponsor, or is it supporting services and for another organization or other organizations?
So this event does bring a lot of business to our businesses, a lot of traffic to our town, a lot of awareness to our town. And we are in our Centennial. So it's, I mean, if that's something you want to do as a sponsorship in lieu of the fees, I think it's something we should consider.
We would have to ask the organization if they would allow us to be a sponsor. We haven't done that.
Well, we haven't been approached, and it's more than the 16,000 or 1,600 or 1,400, because on page 160 we have the complete list of expenses for it, which is almost $5,900. A lot of public works staff, permits, the showmobile tow. I thought we got that as part of our tow contract.
This is a valuation report, basically just stating, just much like the charges for barricades. This is a way that the city tracks those in-kind donations.
Right, because it takes staff time to put it out. So again, I love our police department. Our police officers are wonderful. This is different. This is a union.
Yeah, I was looking at the scorecard and that was completed, and I questioned a couple things. The fundraising status, because there were the 2 organizations. One's a nonprofit, one I don't think is, unless I'm mistaken, to the mayor's point. And then there isn't anything, Carol, to your point about economic development, except maybe perceived community benefit. But if we're going to really start considering economic development as part of this, we probably need to revisit this waiver scorecard that we have. Because I agree, some events, I mean, and we don't have, like, I don't know how many people come into this event, Meredith, historically from out of town. I know a lot of people bring their cars here and stuff, right? But I don't know how much this does for our community. I don't know what the merchants think about the event.
I really don't have the numbers either. I know that last year when the chamber felt strongly about continuing the event was mainly because the downtown merchants.
And to your point about redoing this, I know we've talked about looking at all the fees in town, and that's really one of the reasons this came about. So if we get another ad hoc subcommittee to review the fees, and this can be updated as well.
Yeah, because I have a concern. We are being inconsistent. You know, we had the co-op, which I think we all decided was 0 fee, right?
No, Mike paid $1.
Oh, Mike paid $1, right? Good man. So we aren't being consistent in our decision making here, and I think that's why you guys last council created this. And whomever created it was a good idea, but I think we're
Right, and I have an issue with that one too, because that serves 15 people and it's not open to everyone. So we are not being consistent.
yeah, I agree.
So I stand by what I said.
So I'm going to move approval to waive all fees for the car show.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No.
No.
Item 14, don't go away, Meredith. Consideration and possible action to approve the addition of 1 recreation supervisor full-time position and 1 recreation coordinator full-time position to the Recreation and Parks Department Recreation Division due to the upcoming opening and planning of the El Segundo Aquatic Center. Fiscal impact, $246,586 annually.
Busy myself, but I have to go to the rest. Been a while.
Before you begin, Meredith, we're going to take a 5-minute break. It's 9:08.
Okay.
6:15, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We are back. Meredith.
All right, thank you very much. Well, this evening we are here to talk about the Recreation Division, what the Recreation Division currently does in terms of aquatic staffing and other programs, but also looking into the future as we prepare for the Aquatic Center opening next summer. I do want to take the opportunity to introduce our new Recreation Superintendent, Aricia Yee, and she will be helping me with some portions of the presentation tonight.
Hello, Aricia.
So today, the Recreation Division, as you know, coming off of the heels of 4th of July, we do a lot. The Recreation Division does a lot. The mission of the Recreation Division is pretty simple and straightforward, and that's to enhance the quality of life through people, parks, and programs. Our slogan or our vision is El Segundo's backyard, and that's really something that we pride ourselves on being for a lot of people in our community. You know, some folks don't have large backyards, but really it's about the experience that the Recreation Division provides. And that is a social gathering space, a place where people feel safe, secure, can gather and socialize with their family and their friends, and really create memories and have those experiences of recreation activities. The Recreation Division actually recently went through an exercise and identified their core values, and I think there's 8 of them that they've identified. This is the staff members working together and identifying those principles that are going to guide them in carrying out their mission and their vision, and that is community, integrity, teamwork, fun, tradition, service, outreach, and quality. The strategies that we use are many, but the one particular that why we're here tonight is really, you know, how do we achieve those goals and our goals by appropriately allocating and effectively utilizing resources. I put this quote on here: the only thing that is constant is change, and that really is true for recreation professionals, and that is that recreation is always changing, and the division must be flexible, must be adaptable, very fluid. You know, we build our team and utilize our resources to the best of our ability, using everybody's strengths. And we have quite a diverse group of individuals right now, and we've had quite a few rotations over the years. So our division changes quite often, whether we have supervisors in different locations or coordinators or utilize part-time staff. So again, you know, we really try to be innovative and utilize our resources as they change over the years. And just a snapshot of the budget of the Recreation Division, which is a portion of the Parks and Recreation Department, is $2.7 million. So again, just a snapshot of the Recreation Division, where we are today. We have 3 main hubs. Our 3 recreation supervisors are located at each of these facilities. We've got the checkout, as you know, the clubhouse, and the Joslin Center. And then under these supervisors, we have coordinators and part-time staff at different facilities overseeing different program areas, including Campus El Segundo and our sports fields. We have a teen center, the plunge, also our outdoor pools at Hilltop and Acacia Parks. And also a big portion of what we do on a daily basis, or what the recreation staff does, is plan special events. Within all of this, there's different programs. We'll go through a few pictures here. Skating, tennis programs. We've got summer camp programs, drama, dance classes, our senior services out of the Joslin Center, the farmers market, and then also our transportation programs, which include Dial-A-Ride and the Beach Shuttle. So this slide is really just to show you, while we're focusing on aquatics, there are many other programs that the Recreation Division accomplishes on a daily basis. How we do that is through this organizational structure. So the Recreation Superintendent manages the Recreation Division. There are 2 City Council appointed committees or boards that the Recreation Department liaisons with. That's the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee as well as the Senior Housing Board. As I mentioned earlier, there are 3 Recreation Supervisor positions. Currently, they are housed at the clubhouse. That person overseeing cultural arts, registration, and our activity guide or brochure. The Recreation Supervisor located at the checkout building oversees sports, the general park operations at all of the sports facilities, including Recreation Park, picnic reservations, and also oversees the teen center, and that's managed through part-time staff. And we have a Recreation Supervisor located at Joslin Center. This supervisor oversees our senior programming, the facility itself, our outreach services, the transportation services, and special event planning. 2 of those supervisors oversee a full-time recreation coordinator, one at the clubhouse, and that position oversees many of our classes, our summer camps, as well as the farmers market. And then the other recreation coordinator is currently located at the Plunge, and that position is aquatics, but it also helps out with special event planning and any other assignments as needed. Under all of these, we do have quite a few part-time recreation leaders. We have a series of recreation leader, Recreation Leader 1 actually no longer exists due to minimum wage changes. So we have a Recreation Leader 2, 3, and 4. So looking ahead at the future, as you know, we have the El Segundo Aquatic Center coming up, and this is in collaboration with the Wiseburn Unified School District over at the site of the new high school. Just a snapshot of what that facility is going to look like. We're very excited for it. It's a 53.2 meter by 25 meter competition swimming pool with 2 movable bulkheads, which gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of programming. The second pool on the site is a 25-yard by 4 lane, so it's about 40 feet wide, teaching or warm-up pool. These pools are on separate filtration and pump controls, and that way we can have differing temperatures in each of those bodies of water. They are serviced by locker rooms. We also have family restrooms, which will be very convenient for the younger children or those who need additional space. Staff office and registration area for the city to operate the programs. Both high schools, El Segundo High and Wiseburn High, will have their high school swimming and water polo programs housed here. The facility has spectator seating of over 500 seats, and that enables us to host, or for clubs to rent out and host their own swim meets, large-scale tournaments, things of that nature. We'll have sports lighting, so the programming can go into the nighttime hours. A state-of-the-art scoreboard and timing system, a dedicated parking lot of about 100 spaces, and we do anticipate the facility. It is always in flux and can be subject to change, but right now we are anticipating opening of summer of 2018. So when we look at our comprehensive aquatics program, wanted to show a comparison of the Plunge versus the new aquatic center. The Plunge operating hours, you can see in front of you, 6 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. Monday through Thursday. Close a little bit earlier at 8:30 p.m. on Fridays, 6 a.m. to 3:15 on Saturdays, and we're typically closed on Sundays. We have tried some pilot programs, such as open water polo programs and things like that on Sunday. And then Aquatic Center, these are the anticipated operating hours of the new Aquatic Center. And this is, again, this is our best guess right now and could change. But we're looking at Monday through Thursday, actually Monday through Friday, 5:30 a.m. open to 9:30 p.m. Saturday, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. and then Sunday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We believe that the demand is there and that the programmings will be able to support that. So when you compare the number of hours, operating hours per year, the Plunge is 4,443 estimated, and the Aquatic Center is estimated to be about 5,460. So you can see that the operating hours alone are increasing 23%. And then just another comparison, I think, just to show sort of the gravity of the new facility. It's hard to really visualize on paper the size of the space, but the pool space square footage rise. So the plunge has a small kiddie pool as well, but so both of those pools, just looking at surface area, so when talking in terms of how much area we have to program, how could we put lessons in at the same time as lab swimming, at the same time as something else. Pool space at the plunge currently is 5,511 square feet of surface area, and the new aquatic center body of waters, 2 bodies of waters, is over 16,000 square feet of surface area. So that's about a 300% increase or more than the plunge. Quite a bit of space there. Our current programs at the plunge, our most popular is our master's swim team, our lap swim, water fitness, swim lessons, other youth swim team practices, adaptive swim lessons, recreation swim, special events, and of course the El Segundo High School swim programs and water polo. With the new facility, these are some of the new types of programming that, in addition to the current programs, we'll be able to offer lifeguard classes, family swim, tot swim, more parent and tot classes, more senior fitness exercise programs, therapeutic fitness, have more ability to offer private contract rentals to other swim teams and other types of non-traditional programs such as scuba diving. The Wiseburn High School will be using the swim facility. We'll have birthday parties and who knows what else. So this is the point where we're going to talk more in detail about what we're recommending for staffing for the new aquatic center. ARCIA does come to the city with quite a bit of experience in aquatics programs, so that's very beneficial to where we are in our department. And so she's going to take you through sort of what we recommend for the aquatic center staffing and just a brief overview of what their different roles and responsibilities might be.
Thank you. Good evening. So without us just throwing a whole bunch of titles at you, I also want to give you a little bit of the duties behind their titles so you pretty much understand what they're going to be doing. So we're not just throwing people into the pool. They actually have specific jobs and duties that they have to do. The recreation supervisor, that's, as you can see, let me just go through the titles. We have the recreation supervisor as a full-time position. Recreation coordinator, another full-time position. Pool manager, that's a part-time position. Senior guard, as well as lifeguard, and then cashier. And then this way I can go through each position so you understand what their job duties are. The recreation supervisor, this is the position that's responsible for all of the aquatics operations as well as the facility. They'll manage the budget. They'll also oversee all of the programming. So they will have to approve all of the programming that's going into the facilities, both the plunge as well as the large swim center. They will also manage any kind of contracts that they come in contact with, and they are also responsible for the collaborations that we have out in the community. So they're that point person, that one that you're going to see out there shaking those hands and getting people to come into our facility and really getting the community involved with the large facilities. Then next you have the recreation coordinator. That person is responsible for the planning, the organizing, the implementing of the specific programs. They will also work with the recreation supervisor, but they're pretty much doing the day-to-day programming. So if there are swim lessons, they're going to set that time frame. They're going to set those lessons and those days on which we run those lessons. They'll assist the aquatic supervisor with any community groups, but pretty much they are responsible for the planning of both facilities. Or should I say mostly the large facility. Then next, you'll have the pool manager. The pool manager is responsible for all the maintaining of the training, the skills, and the testing of the staff. So they have to maintain all of the records as well as be able to train lifeguard staff and teach lifeguard staff. So that's their main responsibility. They'll maintain the records for the lifeguard staff, making sure they're up to par, making sure that if there's any audit at the time that we might get from, let's say, county comes in and they want to audit our files and make sure all of our staff, they're certified, they will be responsible for making sure the staff is certified. And next you have your senior lifeguard, and they're pretty much responsible for part-time staff and directing part-time staff, making sure when they're on schedule that all of our part-time staff, they're in their places, they're actually utilizing the skills that they've been taught correctly. And then last, you have our lifeguard staff, and they are overseeing all of the safety, making sure that everyone's safe, both in the water and on the deck. So that's your basic lifeguard. And our cashier, they're responsible for all the money handling that comes through the facility and making sure that everything is accounted for when it comes through the door. Are there any questions?
I just have one question. So you were looking at the number of hours that we needed. On the lifeguards, it says part-time 2 to 6. Is that number enough to cover the number of hours?
Well, it's based on a specific day. So if you're looking for
2 to 6 per day?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So,
and it will depend on which programming is going on or what programming is going on at the time.
So how many lifeguards do you anticipate total? Oh, sorry. I can't see that part.
Oh, you're looking at, if you go down the lifeguards on the more off-season, not the seasonal staff, but the year-round staff, there's going to be approximately 55 for the year-round staff, and then we will bump up to about 90 lifeguards for the summertime staff or seasonal staff. And that covers both facilities.
And how many do we have today?
Right now, we're lingering at about 30, maybe off and on.
So we're thinking
and then
to go up 3 times?
Just about. In the summer, though, we do bump up to about 45 over at the plunge because they're working different schedules. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. This diagram is showing you a little bit about rotation, and let me speak to that first, just to, if anyone's not really into the aquatics world, I'll just give you a little background on rotation and how lifeguards are usually positioned on deck for the best safety. The first diagram you're looking at is probably a day that is low-key. Maybe we have some senior fitness, maybe we have mommy and me classes in the small pool. In the other pool, we may have some lap swimming, maybe masters, they're in there and they're doing their laps, or we might have the bulkhead in where you have half of a small class and then you have some lap swimming on the other side. A pretty light day. So you have 4 guards. The crosses up there, the red crosses are representing the lifeguards. And so at the small pool, and something that light, or the duties that light on that day, you would probably have 1 guard over there. And then you have 3 guards on the big pool. The one, it says at the top 1 in rotation. And I like to keep 1 in rotation, meaning they're probably in the break room taking a 15-minute break. That's usually the guard that starts the rotation every 15 minutes. It guarantees that you have all eyes on the pool at one time. So rotations happen one by one. Everyone doesn't start moving at the same time because you have to keep your eyes on the pool. So we're building in that 15 minutes so lifeguards can get a break every 15 minutes. It keeps them fresh and it keeps them able to stay away from being exhausted, and it gives them time to rehydrate if they need to. On the right, you have a busier day. That's when we probably have our recreation swim. Maybe in the small pool, we have a master swim, or we have a lot of swim team coming and they want to visit and they want to get their practice in the small pool, and they're doing laps. And then in the larger pool, we might have some recreation swim going on with some family swim, and those are 2 different programs. But it can make for a lot of traffic during the day, so you want to make sure that you're covered. So as you can see, on the large pool, there's 4 guards now. And there's 2 guards now in the smaller pool because we have more activity going on. So you have 6 guards now, but you'll have 1 in rotation. So still there's 1 in the break room getting that 15-minute break. So, and they'll start the rotation through again so everyone can get their rest. Are there any questions about the number of guards on the deck?
The water temperature is going to be regulated, and it'll be different in these 2 pools depending upon activities.
Ideally, in the small pool, it's supposed to be a tad bit warmer. I do like to educate everyone in the public that pools don't turn over temperature very fast, so usually you need a 24-hour time period for that temperature to change. So as long as we're programming that in, let's say we have a therapeutic class one day and they need the warmer water, we want to make sure that we program it that way to where we can make that change if we have to.
Let's say the plunge gets rehabilitated and it's a part of our overall programming space. That temperature might be set differently than these 2 to match the activities that would be programmed there.
Yes, and we can also probably maximize more programming or different programming if we do it that way.
Yeah.
Marcia, when you talk about the lifeguards, aren't there some instances where groups will provide their own lifeguards? And are they in that rotation as well?
They are not. These are actually just our own staff. I would probably look to the city to look at volunteer lifeguards because I know with some cities they don't allow that for different reasons. There could be training issues or we don't actually know how they're trained, but I could look into that further to see if that could be of use.
Well, I
to
believe,
the city of El Segundo.
Meredith, you can correct me, but our high school, in order to keep the costs down, their coaches are lifeguards, so they don't have to pay for extra lifeguards.
And but we still keep lifeguards at the site. We still at least have 2 there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this slide, basically we're moving into what are the budget implications of what these staffing recommendations are. The top portion, I'll go through that budget. The bottom portion is just to give you an idea of really how we came up with the budget. And Carol's question to, do you have 2 or 6 lifeguards and the illustrations of that? That will really depend on the programming. So we really wanted to find a way to analyze and come up with an average number of lifeguards over a long period of time. So we actually did an exercise where we took, a Sunday at the big pool, a Sunday at the small pool, Saturday, a weekday, different times of the years, and programmed a sample program for each of those days in each of those pools, charted how many lifeguards we would have on deck, and then every half hour we did that based on every half hour and came up with an average of just over 4 lifeguards scheduled basically every hour of the day at the aquatic center. So that totaled a little over 24,000 lifeguard hours. And so that's the kind of analysis that we use to generate these budget projections. If you recall, some of you were on the council at the time, but in 2015, we did have a consultant provide a financial analysis and projection for the aquatic center. At the time, the report also was really exploring what type of facility the city wanted to build. So it was comparing a base option, a hybrid option, and the upgrade option. Eventually, the city council did elect to go with the upgrade option, which is the option that we're planning for today. And in those projections and financial analysis, there were some assumptions that were made. And so now that we're getting closer and closer to actually opening up the facility, we've revisited those. And this is basically the changes that we see fit based from the 2015 analysis and what we know now and what has evolved into the projected budget here and the differences. So on the maintenance side, this is maintained by the Public Works Department. but we project one pool maintenance technician to handle both of the aquatics facilities. And this is a total of $88,633. This is salaries plus benefits, fully burdened rate. Just for the chart's sake, I split that into two, between the plunge and the aquatic center. On the aquatic side and the recreation side, our proposal is to have a recreation supervisor, full-time person allocated to aquatics, and that budget number for that fully burdened rate is $107,000. A full-time recreation coordinator who would be housed at the plunge is almost $86,000. The pool managers that we spoke of, and the lifeguards and the cashiers, these are all part-time positions and non-benefited positions. Once a part-time employee exceeds 1,000 hours in the fiscal year, the PERS calendar fiscal year, which is a July through June, then they are automatically enrolled into the PERS retirement system. So these numbers are based on keeping all of these part-time positions below that 1,000 hour per year. So the pool managers, we anticipate having 4 of those at 20 hours a week average. This is a new classification that we would need to develop and a pay rate that we would need to establish and work towards with human resources and benchmarking other cities. But we budgeted this position at $21 an hour. We think that that's fairly comparable, and once we do a further analysis, we'll see how close we are. But I think that's a fairly good guess. And so then the next one is lifeguards and cashiers, which we already spoke about. So we'll still have the plunge to operate. So there's obviously a good chunk of lifeguards needed there at $220,000, and then the lifeguards and cashiers. This includes the senior lifeguards as well. For the new facility is estimated to be $500,000 for a total of $720,000. The associated benefits and taxes with the part-time positions is just a 16% factor there for $124,000. And so the total for the aquatics, the entire aquatics program, looks to be about $1.2 million. The difference between what was anticipated from the 2015 study is just under $250,000. Again, this is based on different assumptions. The assumption at the time too was we actually at one time had a recreation supervisor assigned to the plunge, and since then there's been some rotation, so that's actually a coordinator position now, so that factors into it. Also, some assumptions were made on the operating hours for the aquatic center, and they were shorter hours. And so that makes a big difference when you're talking about, 6 to 10 part-time employees on an hourly basis for staying open 2 or 3 hours more than what was projected in the study. Now, that can change. If we decide that we want to start smaller and expand as the programming demands, we can go that route as well. So this is just one way of looking at. Yes.
What hours are you expecting to open and close?
Who's on that?
For the new center, we expect programming to start at 5:30 a.m. and end at 9:30 p.m. And then we'll have about 30 to 45 minutes of staff scheduled before and after for opening and closing duties.
So 10:15 or so in the evening, then it goes dark and comes back around 5 in the
5:30.
morning, 5:30.
Correct.
Okay.
Meredith, is the revenue number projection still like a little over $1 million a year annually?
Yes.
So we're going to be a couple hundred short, it looks like, right? Is that 1.2 is what we're... That's all expenses, all aquatic centers expenses?
No, this is just salaries. This doesn't,
Oh, this is, okay.
this doesn't
So-
include maintenance,
Right.
Okay, so
any
we're,
type of chemicals, this is just pure staff.
so we're
the staff
$500,000 deficit annually, roughly.
Well, how much is the cost to maintain it from a facility standpoint?
So the original estimate in 2015 was that that the deficit to the city for the entire comprehensive program was about $500,000. With these changes, the way that I calculate it would be, this would be in addition to that. Now, I haven't really reviewed, to be honest, the revenue projections in the 2015 study, and that's just because we're still so far out to really understand the programming, the fees that'll be charged, the type of events that we'll be attracting. So I would anticipate that number changing, hopefully for the better as well. And you know, I think we have a little bit of time to look at that.
Well,
too.
in the table that's in here that was from 2015 showed that the plunge was really kind of the culprit, if you will, like $500,000 in annual operating deficit.
Right.
Whereas the aquatic center was almost cash flow positive prior to these changes, right? So is that still kind of, that ratio still going to be somewhat the same in terms of the?
We anticipate the plunge being a better performer overall with the changes of the aquatic center, just because the staff that we're going to employ and the programming that, you know, the dedication to the program, not that we don't have it now, but we'll be able to offer probably 3 times as many swim lessons. You know, we'll probably have to recoup some fees some way of maybe a swim card or things like that. And I know there's been a lot of, you know, a lot of the revenue projections in the 2015 study are assuming that fees are going to slightly increase for certain programs. And at the time, the council was very well aware that in order for this to be a financially feasible operation, that there will need to be some changes at the plunge as well.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, the plunge historically, the table that's in here that shows from 2015 that the plunge was operating at a deficit of almost $500,000, 473,000. Is that historically been pretty constant, that number?
Yes.
Okay. So really, we're going to be, assuming the revenue numbers don't change, we're going to be at a deficit of about $750,000, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Just clarification. So currently the plunge is a $500,000 in deficit annually.
Right.
You're saying combined, the cost of running both facilities is going, from a facility standpoint, is going to be about $500,000 annually. Because what this is, what, close to 3, I can't read the numbers because it's so far away.
Right, so what we're saying is the study indicated that running both facilities would basically remain a $500,000 deficit to the city. With the staffing proposal in front of you tonight, that would increase to about $750,000.
Is that an assumption with the rehabbed plunge that we're not constantly fixing?
No, it's assuming that the plunge is
status quo,
the same, but with additional programming.
To the mayor's point, a big number for the plunge has been this maintenance public works, 220,000. I know, Mike, no? No, the plunge has had a lot of ongoing maintenance issues, right?
I mean, it's hit or miss, but it probably includes salary for the pool maintenance technician, but also chemicals, sanitation, custodial.
I guess what I'm trying to get at, to the mayor's point, if we spent, capital improvement on the plunge, would that line item go down?
I would think so, yes. Utilities
significantly,
and
or
yes.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on. So aside from the aquatic center, which is obviously on all of our minds as far as planning for the future, we also wanted to bring to your attention that there are other goals that the Recreation Division has in terms of programming. And with the proposal in front of you tonight to add a recreation supervisor and a recreation coordinator to the division, we believe it would also allow us to tackle some of the other things on our wish list. And those are in front of you here, but some of them include develop a year-round volunteer program. We think that there's opportunity here in this community to be able to do that. Currently, we have a summer youth volunteer program, and that's really the extent of our volunteer program other than our Meals on Wheels program. But there are plenty of people out there who do look for opportunities to volunteer within the community, and perhaps it can even help us save $1 or $2 at special events, planting flowers, who knows. Enhancing day camp programs. Our day camp programs have just been growing exponentially over the last 4 or 5 years, so we would continue to be able to do that. Increase our customer engagement and outreach efforts, whether that's through technology or other sorts of methods. We would like to have more engagement opportunities with our customers and be able to inform them and educate them on what we do. Implementing a comprehensive approach to part-time personnel management. This is something that we're starting to do, but is a supervisory function that we'd like to streamline our processes rather than each supervisor sort of going and hiring and recruiting and training individually, for the clubhouse or the teen center. Really tackle it from a more streamlined point of view. We are getting more and more into tracking performance measurements, so that takes time, but we want to make sure that we are tracking the right things, tracking it accurately, consistently, and then using that information appropriately as well. There's possibly some changes coming up at the golf course, and we also anticipate having a little bit of a heavier hand in facilitating the golf programming over at the golf course. We'd like to expand the teen center and skate park programming. At one time, we did have a full-time position located at the teen center. We no longer do. Manage our event sponsorship program growth. Again, we get more and more inquiries about local businesses really wanting to donate and sponsor and partner with us. But with that comes time to manage those partnerships and making sure that the sponsors are receiving the benefits that we promise them. And also something we haven't been able to do too much of is really utilize El Segundo Beach and making that another area that we can program recreational opportunities at. So with that being said, we do feel pretty strongly about having a supervisor and a coordinator wholly dedicated to the aquatics program if we want to open this facility to the best of our ability and make sure that it performs the way that we would like it to for the community. And so what that means to us is, what does that do to the rest of the division? So this is our proposed organizational structure with that added recreation supervisor over here in the aquatics. So this is sort of the aquatics branch, which would be a supervisor and coordinator. And then we would request this coordinator position and most likely house it at the teen center. Probably divvy up some of the different programs a little bit differently than we do now, but this is what the structure would look like. Now, we do actually have 2 recreation supervisor vacancies currently. And with that being said, wanted to at least show you that there is another option, and that is more of a restructuring option, a little bit of a cost savings. Again, this does put a supervisor and coordinator in aquatics specifically in 100% for each of those positions. But there's an opportunity to sort of restructure that supervisory level and then potentially add 2 coordinator level positions. The difference between those two is about $22,000 on an annual basis. But we would basically have a coordinator at the checkout building instead of a supervisor and take on some of those duties. So this would require one of the supervisors to oversee 2 coordinators and then each of the others to have a coordinator beneath them. So with that being said, the recommendation in front of you tonight is to approve an additional recreation supervisor position. The reason why It's in front of you tonight in July, and it seems so far off, but really this position is needed to be in place, working with the city at least 6 months prior to opening this facility. And that is that they are going out, they are networking with USA Swimming, with different swim teams, starting, getting their training programs up to speed so that when they can recruit and hire, train lifeguards. There's a lot to be done to make sure that the day that this pool opens, we have people swimming in the pool. Additionally, to approve the recreation coordinator position, and with that position approval, we would take another probably couple of weeks to really review who we have in current positions and what we would want to recruit for and where that position would be placed. And also provide direction to us to proceed with the development of the new classification for the part-time pool manager position. As mentioned in your staff report, at the end, the budget, the fiscal impact for these actions tonight would be for fiscal year 17-18, would be 100% of the cost for the recreation supervisor, because again, the goal would be to put this person in place in October or November. The recreation coordinator position would most likely come on board sometime in the spring, so we would include about half of that cost in the fiscal year 17-18 budget. And then with the projected summer opening, the part-time personnel cost would really be about 25% of what you saw on the screen tonight for the 17-18 budget. And then just looking into the future, just to sort of plant the seed, if we move forward with this pool manager position, we would have to come back to the city council to approve the classification and the pay range. And then another item that we would bring with that is to separate out our senior lifeguard and our lifeguard classifications. They're currently classified as Recreation Leader 3 and 4. And so we would like to really describe what the role and responsibility of those positions are and make sure that we approve what the certifications for those positions are and minimum qualifications. So we'd like to pull those out, really not change the pay structure at all, but just make it a separate classification. That concludes our slides, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. The timeline seems to be moving further into the future. At first, we were talking about spring of 18. Now we're talking about summer 18, July. Is the pool going to be ready and that's when you want to open it, or what keeps moving back the completion date?
Well, for one, Wiseburn is managing the construction. We do have one of the engineers from Public Works and a consultant, construction managing consultant, sitting in on those meetings. So specifically, Ken probably knows more about the timeline than I do, but according to the agreement, Wiseburn must complete the pool by July 31st of 2018. There was an ambitious sort of schedule put in place at the very beginning of the construction period that said March, April, but it does look like the pool will be complete. Water can be, filled, but what's not going to be complete until June is the locker room and that support facility area. So obviously we wouldn't want to open the pool without restrooms.
Because the gym with the locker rooms and the pools are both in a second phase. So they're going to be constructed together.
Right. Well, this entire site rendering you see here is considered phase 2 of the Wiseburn High School project. And this front piece right here are the shared. They're not shared locker rooms and restrooms. They're designed in a way where doors close and you can only access it from either the gym or the pool. But they are in that building construction phase, correct?
You said we wouldn't want to begin or to use it without restrooms, but we're probably, the health code aren't allowed to.
Correct. Right. So we may have opportunities to maybe get lifeguards in the pool prior to that. And do some trainings and things like that with our staffing, but we wouldn't open to the public until everything was ready.
Start your programming in July of 18. It would be helpful if you could dust off that revenue piece.
Sure.
To Carol's questions, and remind us what that looks like, and then see if you can figure out if it's realistic or not really current, and maybe there's other revenues that'll make this overall picture look better.
Right.
Because that's been a long time, I think, since that part of the equation was looked at. And then finally, has any thought been given, or is it even possible to contract out the operation of these pools rather than the city running them, contract them out to a team or the YMCA or something like that? And would that be better for us cost-wise? Have we looked at that?
We have discussed it. I've asked our aquatics consultant some questions along those lines. What I've heard from him, and he's been involved in aquatics programs throughout the country, is that typically doesn't work. He has not seen a successful model do that, mainly because if you contract out with a nonprofit, obviously it doesn't always work out to be sustainable for that. And same with for-profit. Obviously they want to make a profit, and that's tough to do. I know I can ask Ericia to sort of speak to that too, because she has seen that in other cities that she's worked for.
The previous city I worked for, 7 pools, all contracted out. With nonprofits, they can't really afford a lot. The city ended up paying them to run the facility. So it really didn't pan out. If they ran out of funds, we had to go back and request more. So they ended up not really taking care of the facility. So it really wasn't a good, I would say, a good partnership for the city at all. And actually, they're trying to revamp that arrangement right now to where they can hire on their own lifeguards and try to run it themselves, because it just didn't work out.
So there's aquatic centers across California, and I'm wondering if they've tried that solution and how it's come out for them. And is it even legal for us to do that, to contract it out? I don't know the answer to that.
I would think it could be legal. Yeah.
You don't get the union blowback on that from they want to represent more and more employees always.
Is it legal from a school district standpoint?
I'll have to think on that. I've never had an asset like this to think about how to keep it up.
I would think from a city standpoint, the services are rather unique. So the government code allows the city to contract out certain special services. So it'd just be a matter of the council making a finding that these are such unique services that it was making the decision to contract it out rather than to have rank and file employees fill those positions.
Because we currently do that with the golf course, which would be kind of something very similar.
Yeah, I'm thinking, that if we explored that and it showed that our costs were significantly reduced, it's something that we might want to consider as an alternative. And if we're just going to avoid looking into it, then we may be suffering a net loss when we could be in a different economic space with it.
And then Meredith, you mentioned that you have 3 open supervisor positions right now?
We have two vacancies.
So is there a delay in getting those filled, or is it just?
Well, we have been delaying that pending this conversation to some extent. However, we did post the position, and we have had first and second interviews. Quite a few talented candidates, but we haven't made any selections or job offers just quite yet to see how this all plays out.
And then on top of all this, of all that you're doing in the expansion, you now also will be going toward a new system. implementation.
Right, software system.
Yes,
Correct.
so your staff is going to definitely be encumbered in the next couple upcoming months.
Correct.
Do we have an ETC on that?
I believe the RFP went out, right, and came back. I'm not sure what the,
Right, so the proposals are under review right now, and our stated timeline for going live was December 1st, and we have yet to really engage with the two vendors who've proposed and really see if that's realistic, but anywhere between December, January, February, somewhere in that time frame.
and that's a complete overhaul of the system and brand new system for the not just the aquatics, but all of rec, yeah, city. It will include POS functionality as well.
Correct.
Yeah, looking at this, there's a bunch of history between the different revenue streams that were looked at in the reports earlier on. It'd be nice to see a summary of all that put together with all the expenses associated with the pools, because I think we're making some assumptions up here that I don't think are very accurate. I think there's some gaps here. So when I look at the expenses, I'm looking at there's the utilities that complement, there's a manpower complement. You shared manpower today, and there's other consumables and things, in chemicals and that go with this. So there's the cost of running the pool was, from my recollection, adding the new facility was going to be an additional $500,000. Not, and if it was a break-even thing, there was a significant amount of money. Now you want to add, another 50% of that in manpower alone. I'm not ready to say yes to that until we see the whole picture of how this thing really shapes up. And this ought to be something that's in our strategic plan. And, that's when we ought to be addressing this, is how do the numbers come together in the budget? Because where's this money coming from is the next question I'd have to have before I could say yes to it. And I don't have those answers right now. And I got a buck on the table that says we'll probably that the revenue streams are going to go down from the original estimate.
So did we actually put money in the budget for added staff or a supervisor level for the aquatic center in this year's budget? Was that a line item that we put in, or
For fiscal year 17-18?
mm-hmm. We haven't?
No.
No. 16, 17. Did we put any money in the budget for the aquatic center for any manpower? No.
I'm trying to scribble the net present value of all this stuff, and for what it's worth, I think we would have been much better off putting $6 million in the deal and walking away from it. I think we're holding about 10 to 15 in net present value of this thing going forward. So got on the wrong side of that deal.
Yeah, I think the big thing that we need to understand tonight is, I think a lot of the part-time personnel, there's definitely some time to really nail that down and attach that to revenue. And again, that's really dependent upon the operating hours and what type of programming we put in there. The revenue and the financial sustainability is also dependent on the programming and the amount of programming that we have during operating hours. With the full-time staff, it really, like Carol had mentioned, we have two vacancies right now, one at the clubhouse, one at the Joslin Center. And so the big question that the rec division is facing and our department is facing is, do we fill one or do we fill two? And how long are we going to sort of try to maintain the operations that we currently are responsible for maintaining if we're sort of placeholding a vacancy?
Because the person that if you were going to hire a full-time aquatic center you would want someone with that type of experience.
We would absolutely target somebody with specific aquatics experience.
So at this time, the one thing you're really in need of is an answer on the additional supervisor.
Correct.
The other stuff can wait.
Right.
I guess what it comes down to, though, is there a viable option for outsourcing, right? Because you wouldn't do both, probably, right? If you did decide to outsource, or would you?
I really don't know. I think my first reaction to outsourcing would be, would we lose that community feel and the priorities and core values of, what we're really anticipating this program to be with the community programming and the high schools and things of that nature. So, I'd really have to, I don't know how to engage any sort of potential management companies. I mean, we can certainly do our best to do that and ask those questions, what that might look like. But I have not seen it, so I'd have to do a lot of research on that.
So you're looking for approval tonight. Would you go back and show us which?
Sure. Would you like to see it in chart form?
Yeah, in the
Okay.
chart, please. Your chart.
Right. So this is the request would be, again, outsourcing aside, the conversation of city managing the facility would be a supervisor at the aquatic center and a coordinator at the plunge. But again, this also would include management of the hilltop and acacia pools during the summer. So with that being said, it's either a fourth supervisor added to the division and a third coordinator, or the second option would be to restructure our 3 supervisor positions and add 2 coordinator level positions.
And the recreation supervisor would be the POC for selling the pool and the programming.
Right.
So even if we hired somebody, a third party, to manage it for us, we would still need that POC to be the...
Well, we would need somebody to manage that contract and make sure that they're, fulfilling the obligations.
And so if we hired somebody and then we decided to go third party, what's our ability to let somebody go? If we no longer have that position, do we have to find another position, or does that person have a job for life?
I don't know the answer to that. If that's a...
Well, you're asking for 2 supervisors or 1 and a coordinator, right?
A 1 supervisor.
And you said there was an option to make this recreation supervisor a coordinator. I would just think you could repurpose someone probably, right? If they might be an aquatic specialist, but they probably know recreation and parks, right? Maybe.
Right. I mean, there's always things to do.
Well, an aquatics person, though, is a subject matter expert about aquatics.
Uh-huh.
So.
So timing is of an essence, because as we know, it's going to take a long time to get someone hired. We know that this person needs to be up and running at the very least 6 months prior to the opening of the pool. So if we back into that date, we're hoping the pool will open in July. And so you need, say, 3 months to get someone hired. So we need to approve this position within the next month or 2 so that you guys, if this is to meet the timeline, correct?
Right. I mean,
so we have the option is you're asking for either 1 supervisor and a coordinator,
right,
or repurpose the supervisors and 2 coordinators.
Correct.
And you can't, and right now you have 2 openings on supervisors, and you don't want to move forward with them on the hiring because you're not sure how the structure of the organization is going to look.
Correct.
So you're kind of really at a standstill.
Right.
So you're coming to us to say you're at a standstill, you have a lot on your plate, you got a new system coming in down the pike, you need some help and some guidance and a decision made.
Yes.
They need direction.
They need direction.
Okay. So this shows one, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say another option. I think, hasn't the city employed some independent contractors in the past in key positions as like a trial basis, 90 days? See how they do. Have them help formulate the strategy. Do we outsource or do we bring this in-house? And what are the merits of both? And then give them opportunity to prove their merits. And if the solution is to do it internally, then they're the person to lead the charge. And if it's not, then we cut it off and there's no obligation beyond that.
Is that legal?
I was asking Meredith if our existing consultant could take that on,
Stu?
but,
I don't think he has the skill sets, though.
yeah, it might be a different
And he
different
lives far,
question,
far away,
but,
so I think you need someone that's in town.
Yeah, I know, more tactical too. You're talking about like creating the programs, reaching out to the community and all that, right?
Right.
Is a consultant, is that a viable option to bring a consultant to be the acting supervisor? Do those people exist out there in a consultant role? I mean, are they easy to find, or is this something that's...
Honestly, I really don't know. I've never had that experience in Recreation and Parks Department.
So
just because typically they are supervising employees and really part of, getting direction. And I think there might be a bit of a fuzzy line there where, it's not, I don't know that it's going to be a set of things to go and do and then bring back. I think it's going to be a pretty...
If we use the method of backing in from July to January, and then 3 months before January is about 2 months from now, could you come back could you talk to Stu about the viability of that, or where one looks for that sort of individual, and then report back to us in August?
Sure. Do that.
And so and I agree with you that maybe a little bit of additional research needs to be done, but we also do need to be cognizant that you're holding off on, can you move forward on at least hiring one of the supervisors?
Or coordinator?
We can. We can. We've definitely, that's a possibility, just given the locations that they're Joslin or Clubhouse,
They would just have to be
sort of
told that their
depends
job could
which way we
change.
want to go. Right.
Their job could change dramatically or in a very short period of time. Is that okay to do that? To hire someone with the expectation that their job could be this, that, or something else in the near future?
Right. And I'm just saying that because there's candidates that are more suited for one than the other. But generally speaking, recreation professionals are generalists. And we've done rotations in our department before, and that's to be expected. So it is possible to move forward with one.
So then the other thing is, you were also asking for an additional coordinator, either one coordinator or two coordinators, depending on.
Mm-hmm.
Is a coordinator position, if we approved a coordinator position, that would also give you some breathing room, right?
Yes.
Could you flip to the other chart?
Sure.
It shows the two coordinators. Okay.
Are we spending money outside of budget right now? We're proposing to spend money that's not in any of our budgets, correct?
I thought she said she had this money in her budget.
This will be for 17-18.
I believe the answer, the reason we're here tonight, first of all, is the aquatic subcommittee asked us to come forward with a staffing recommendation. But because of our hiring process and the amount of time it takes and finding the right person, we want to start early. So I think the dollars are really going to start to be spent next year, next budget year, but we want to start the recruitment process. And just by way of background, the previous council wanted to build a competition aquatics facility, and we moved down that path. And we knew we were going to be operating that facility at a loss. Where the revenue and cost discussion really started is when we started talking about the hybrid option versus the base option. My recollection is, did we want to spend additional money to build two pools and to build a bigger pool, and how much of that money, additional money, we were going to recoup? But I think the understanding from the beginning of this agreement with Wiseburn was we were going to add to our operating costs. The question was really how much, and how much can we recoup? And I know council is averse to adding full-time positions because of the long-term PERS costs and the fully burdened costs, but and I am too. I don't think we're ever going to get back to the pre-recession levels of staffing at this city. That's just a new normal for us. But this is a huge new obligation, and you want us to do it right. And in order to do so, staff's recommendation is that we add some full-time positions to do it right. We can decrease staffing in the future if we feel that it's overstaffed. We can look into the contracting model. You do lose control of some of the decisions and a part of the facility operations when you contract it out. And if it were a more successful model, I think we'd see it more often. But we can spend some time looking at what facilities in Southern California are contracted out. I met with one company that took over a facility in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl because the city of Pasadena during the recession couldn't operate it anymore. So the city of Pasadena, I believe, was faced with either closing the facility or allowing a nonprofit to operate it. I believe that we want to operate this facility, we want to control it, and we want it to be a community facility.
So can we go back to option 1, please? I lean towards option 1 with the recreation supervisor to get started on that, and then to get a coordinator for the teen center and all those associated areas. And we could still explore a third party, but gets the process going. And you're right, I know there was conversation about breaking even with this, but we don't really have any parks facilities that break even. A park is a loss leader by definition. That's a service we provide.
It's just, the challenge for me is there's so much clarity around the expenses, and there's very little on the top line. So it's not about, like, I agree, this is an asset that the city will have for its citizens, and we should subsidize it. It's just to what degree, and not knowing what that number is going to be is the part that's challenging for me. So I like your suggestion, Mayor, but the caveat for me would be, why not do some 1099 independent contractor, aquatic supervisor, give them an opportunity to test that individual, not only because we're not sure what we need, but also because this is a critical role, and you want to make sure you get the right person in that role, I think, and that would give you the opportunity to evaluate them and see if they're the right fit.
That's why I recommended coming back in August, and Meredith could speak to Stu Isaacson, who is our consultant, and see if he can offer up some people to talk to. Or
yeah, and I know the people that have involved, like the Shodorfs and Lee Davis, and they're really tied into the aquatics committee and community. I'm sure they have some ideas as well. So, okay.
Meredith can speak to them as well. So is that our direction then, to ask Meredith to come back with? In the meantime, what about the recreation coordinator? Approving that. You've already held interviews for those, Meredith?
No.
Oh, not for that one? Who did you hold interviews for?
The recreation supervisor. So
the
we currently have
okay.
vacancies in Clubhouse here and Joslin. I would say, as far as testing a consultant on a rec supervisor level for aquatic center, there are probably people out there who could do the job and help us prepare. I don't know if we're going to find somebody who's willing to, say, leave their city job to do that, to test in that capacity. So it really depends on what type of individual we're looking for. If it's somebody with specific municipal experience who's currently working, I don't see many people taking that risk to 1099 on this type of a job.
Let's try it, because we've done it before in the city. We had someone leave another agency, come here as a 1099 before we decided to hire him full-time pretty recently, and it couldn't hurt to try, right?
So would you like 2 weeks to do that, Meredith, or a month?
I'm sorry, what the direction is to ask our current consultant
and some of our aquatics subcommittee people about a 1099 employee.
Yeah,
if
that
that's
doesn't take too
reasonable.
long. Yeah,
So 2 weeks, the next meeting, the 18th?
sure.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Position that is represented by a bargaining unit. Bring in a consultant, just to be clear, and you decided to hire permanent. They'd have to complete.
Okay.
I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you for that, Lynn. So does that change anyone's opinion?
Yeah, I'm not sure that when you get in the recreation side of it, how much of a specialty the aquatics piece really is. And maybe there's people out there that have the skills that could fill either one of those jobs, and having the opportunity to be the first aquatics center supervisor going forward here might allow you to pick up one of the supervisors for, the clubhouse or Joslin Center that has more skills than's needed for the Joslin Center or clubhouse. So
Okay, well, since you have interviewed people, how about you come back July 18th with what you've learned, and then we'll make a decision at that point?
And show us the economics of this. Show us where we're going to pay for, how we're going to pay for this too. That's the other issue that I've got big concern with, is we're throwing $250,000 out there without even batting an eye at it. So,
well, I think
maybe you could talk to Joe to build some kind of model as far as programming costs, and if we, as far as how much we charge and what a couple options would be out there, so we can look to see if there's ways we can try to recoup some of that cost.
Okay, is that enough direction, Meredith, for 2 weeks from now?
Yes, I think that some pieces of that we'll probably be able to bring back in 2 weeks, but we'll keep working on the entire picture.
Okay,
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. I know you worked really hard on this, and thank you, Arcia.
But she's had a lot of downtime recently, so. Yes, okay, reports. City manager.
Two things real quick. We are having our first strategic planning session next week. It will be held July 11th, beginning at 12:30 in the El Segundo Public Library. The first session is really intended to be information and education. We're going to go through our achievements and accomplishments over the last year with the strategic plan. We're going to review the regional, state, and local trends that are affecting El Segundo. You're going to see our financial outlook for next year for the first time. Then we're going to start talking about potential priorities for next year's budget and next year's strategic plan. And we'll get back together in August and decide on some of those priorities. And we'll have a better idea in August also of where a tighter number on where our budget is going to be for next year. So that was item one. Item two, and I know the rest of you are going to mention it, so I'll just stick to the employee side. Thank you to everybody who worked yesterday and made sure that we had a great time and a safe time here in El Segundo. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, city attorney.
No reports, Madam Mayor.
City clerk.
No report.
City treasurer is not here. Councilmember Brand.
Yeah, I attended the Torrance first annual arts festival that Dan Ashcraft told us about here months ago, and was quite an event. They had everything going there, from working artists to Pink's Hot Dogs and musical performances. Big turnout, very successful day for them. There was a write-up in the Breeze maybe today about it, and so that was nice to see that work out so well. The Forest last night was amazing, especially at that end, that Centennial fireworks additional piece. For a while there, I thought I had gotten into Disneyland and I hadn't had to pay. It was just amazing. But the racket from all that kept on going till I went to bed at midnight, but not from our show, from just illegal shows across LA County. And there's a lot of spent fireworks and firecrackers in the streets this morning. People who live in different parts told me, and very noisy holiday. I wanted to thank you, Mayor, for recognizing Sari and my 50th anniversary. You probably saw the picture in the paper. That really was what we looked like 50 years ago. That was really us. And you can see we've changed it. Some people might consider it a workers' comp, but it's been a long time, 50 years, to go through. And we're heading for 51, but thanks for the recognition. Gotten a lot of calls from people about, was that really us? It was at one time. Same year that the Proud Bird opened, and it's reopening now too, so I don't think they're connected. Anyway, thank you very much.
Congratulations. That's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Perstek?
Now, I just want to thank the Parks and Recs Department for all their efforts. I know that they've got a lot going on right now, and I appreciate all that you've done, and the Public Works and the Fire Department and the Police Department for making the event go seamless yesterday. There's a lot of work behind the scenes, so thank you very much. And I do want to, I know I stepped out when you talked about the downtown committee, forming a downtown committee. I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that, and that the committee's formed, and that we set some timelines around that committee so that we can move forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Dugan?
Again, thanks to the Parks and Rec staff. Mayor Pro Tem Drew and I were at the pie eating contest, and they helped set that up. So they were working all day, so they did a great job. So thanks again, and that'll be all for me.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Boyles?
Thanks to the staff and the Centennial Committee. It was a great event, great Independence Day. Honored to be there, and great country. So it was wonderful to celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you. So last week I was able to attend the AT&T Girls Who Code kickoff, the meet and greet, which was really wonderful. AT&T provides a 7-week immersion program. It's 5 days a week for young women to see what it's like to code and the things you can do. I met one student from El Segundo High School there. I think I met 5 from Da Vinci. And I would encourage everyone, if you want your daughter to get involved, to get more information for next summer. This is a career that pays well, lots of opportunity, lots of flexibility. So I would really love to see our local girls get involved with that if they're interested. Also last week, Da Vinci students came here to City Hall for a summer school civics group that they had. Dr. Brand was there, as well as Chief Donovan, Lieutenant Kim, Lieutenant Garcia, and Officer Paulson. And we talked, and the city manager, and we talked about what we do as a city and the services we provide and how they can get involved in their own city. So that was a wonderful program. I've asked our school district for a couple years if we could start some sort of a program for student government to come to City Hall for a day and shadow not just the electeds, but also the people who work here. I believe the city manager did that in high school, and you shadowed the planning and building director, and look what happened. So I hope we can get that program involved here. Also, I attended the ribbon cutting for Anytime Fitness. They're in the In-N-Out Plaza, so welcome to El Segundo. Tomorrow, the city manager, the public works director, and our new emergency management coordinator and I are going to another meeting for Vista Del Mar. It's a regional meeting with the South Bay cities to talk about what's going there with the restriping and the impact it has on traffic and emergency egress. And as the city manager mentioned earlier today, we had a really wonderful event. We had Chief Whalen taking his oath with his family, and it was really a good day in El Segundo. The city manager and I say when it's a good day to be a city manager and a good day to be a mayor, and today was a good day. So Chief, we welcome you, or we wish you every success. As you've heard from everybody, and you're going to keep hearing, the Independence Day celebration yesterday was fantastic. So thank you. It all just didn't happen yesterday. Meredith and her people and Ken's people, all the street everybody's been working on it for days and days. It was beautiful. Thank you to the Centennial Committee for spending the extra money to have the fireworks. If you weren't there, I'm sorry because you missed a really once-in-a-lifetime occasion, although maybe we'll do it in another 100 years. So again, thank you to all of our city employees who were there. I know Chief was there all day. Greg, I know you were there. Was Sam out there? I know Meredith. I saw her and Sean all day. I mean, truly, it takes a village, and thank you for just making us shine and sparkling. So it was a wonderful day. So with that, we go back to public communications.
Good evening. You all know me. I'm former El Segundo City Councilman Mike Robbins and 34-year resident of El Segundo and a homeowner here as well. First, I would like to congratulate and welcome our new police chief, Bill Waive. Welcome to El Segundo. And second, I hope you all had an enjoyable Independence Day celebration. This year's fireworks show I thought was really excellent. I believe it was actually better than in past years. It was really spectacular. The reason I came here tonight actually was to discuss agenda item D3, consideration and possible action to adopt a resolution joining our United States cities in the Climate Mayors Network supporting the goals of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Instead of calling themselves the Climate Mayors Network, they really ought to call themselves the Socialist Mayors Network. That would be more accurate. Global warming, climate change is related to national and foreign policy, is very controversial for very good reasons, and is not appropriate for the city to spend taxpayer money and staff time and resources on it. Assembly Bill 32, which was mentioned in the resolution on the agenda, the cap and trade Assembly Bill in the state legislature, which they euphemistically named the Global Warming Solutions Act of 2006, actually created a system of quotas and restrictions on what businesses can output in carbon dioxide gas, and then it would make businesses buy additional additions to their quota so they could continue operating their business as they used to before. This is a socialist type redistribution of income scheme. It's very, very bad. And the claims that would benefit our environment and prevent a catastrophe is just absurd. The real goal of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change and the global warming, climate change, socialist political movement in general is to raise taxes and fees and the cost of energy and to impose national and international redistribution of money from those who earned it to those who did not earn it. The global warming, climate change, socialist agenda is based on Karl Marx's redistribution principle, quote, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs, unquote, meaning government should take money from the people and businesses that earned it and redistribute it to the people and businesses that did not earn it. Kind of make things more, quote unquote, equal. The global warming climate change scammers avoid discussing how much taxpayer and consumer money they want to redistribute from the United States to other countries, and that spending billions or perhaps even trillions of taxpayer dollars would at best reduce the Earth's temperature by only a fraction of a degree over many years. There have been many alarmist environmental hoaxes, frauds, and scams in the past. You probably remember these, including the coming ice age, the ozone hole, acid rain, and the spotted owl, which alarmists falsely claimed could only live in old-growth forests, and they used that as an excuse to restrict logging, which provides the lumber that we need for things like to build and upgrade our homes. The latest alarmist environmental hoax is catastrophic man-made global warming, which was renamed to climate change because the data show the Earth has not warmed in the last 18 years, and because under climate change, you can claim you are correct no matter which way the climate changes. Global warming climate change alarmism is based on fake science, which is used to generate fake news to influence voters, public opinion, and election outcomes. It is used as a campaign issue to frighten voters into electing socialists and Marxists who run as quote-unquote progressives, is how they branded themselves or rebranded themselves, that take away our freedom and our hard-earned money. There has been a whole cottage industry created around global warming climate change alarmism, funded with taxpayers' money. Global warming climate change research money goes either entirely or almost entirely to advocacy researchers who generate biased and unscientific research, in many cases who support the global warming climate change political movement. To believe in and follow the socialist global warming climate change political agenda to redistribute income and savings on a national and international level, you have to believe three things. You have to believe there is or will be catastrophic man-made global warming climate change. That is, you have to believe there is global warming, number one. Number two, that the global warming will have catastrophic results. And number three, that human activity is creating global warming that is significant relative to any global warming that is happening due to nature and the laws of physics outside human control. The Earth's climate is affected by many natural phenomena outside human control. These include, one, the sun does not operate like a light bulb producing constant uniform energy output. The sun has its own weather, currents, solar storms, and solar flares that affect the Earth's climate and weather. The sun's energy output varies in multi-year cycles. Number two, the Earth's rotation about its axis is not uniform. It has a slight precession or wobble to it. And ocean currents and air currents also affect our weather. It's a big scam. Thank you.
See no more public communications, council comments? No? Well, with that, we are adjourned, 10:41.